Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you wholeheartedly to this debate on 15 years of membership of Bulgaria and Romania in the European Union. I'm very happy to co-host this here in the House of the European Union in Vienna with Emil, the ambassador of Romania, with Albena, the attaché of Bulgaria, and with Paul Schmidt, the Secretary General of the Austrian Society for European Politics. Thanks for joining us. It's a difficult time in which the European Union, the world is at the moment, because we are under attack. Our civilized order is under attack by Russia in the east of our continent. War has returned to Europe. But that is a particular reason to speak about ourselves, what links us to each other, what we have achieved over the past decades, and how we're working together inside our European Union that is never perfect, is permanently growing, but has a lot of assets, as I think we see in particular in these days, as a model of peace and prosperity. This morning, I was with Emil and Albena here in the Sigmund Freud Park, together with some of the Erasmus students and some of you. And we were there, not because you have always to think about Sigmund Freud when you think about European topics. It's always a bit psychoanalytical. But because in this park, about 20 years ago, the representation of the European Commission in Austria, together with the city of Vienna, planted trees for every member state of the European Union. At the time, 15 trees. Then came the big enlargement, 2004, and we added a table with 10 seats in the middle of this circle of trees. And whenever I pass by, it's a beautiful monument. Since 3 years, I walk through this park. I said, but time seems to have stood still since 2004, because no addition was made. So we spoke to the mayor of Vienna, and they planted on the 9th of May this year a tree for Bulgaria, a tree for Romania, and they planted a tree also for Croatia. And the British tree, we'll let it stand. Not that you have any misunderstandings. We said we will always remain friends in spite of Brexit, because I think that is appropriate. We only plant trees in Europe. We never destroy a tree. That's sustainable policy from the beginning of the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, some reflections on the 15 years of membership of these two wonderful countries, Bulgaria and Romania. First of all, 26 million people were added to the European Union on the 1st of January 2007. I think this as such shows what a wonderful event is. 26 million additional citizens of the European Union, and that means many new friendships, not only Emil and Albena, but I have in my team, I have wonderful Bulgarians like Dafina. I had wonderful Romanians in my team, and many of the people who are sitting here in the rooms are today self-evidently citizens of the European Union. So this is, I think, probably the nicest thing about enlargement of the European Union. We are not enlarging economies, we are uniting peoples. We should never forget that. The second thing that strikes me when thinking back to these 15 years, something changed for the European Union in these 15 years, because suddenly our center of gravity has changed. The Black Sea is now a European Union bordered sea. This changes geopolitics. This changes our thinking, and I think we see this in particular in these days, that our perspective on the war with Ukraine is very different than it would be without the addition and the perspective of Romania and Bulgaria. Culturally, we have changed, because the culture of these two countries enriched the European Union. We have even an additional alphabet now in the European Union, Cyrillic, the third alphabet that we have in our diverse continent. We have even the Cyrillic alphabet in all new euro banknotes printed after 2007, because, of course, Bulgaria and Romania are member states with a derogation. That means once they fulfill the criteria, they can join the euro. When thinking back to these 15 years, we should also recall that this sixth enlargement of the European Union, it was the enlargement number 6, was also the most difficult and challenging. We should not hide that in a moment of celebration. Why was it difficult? It was difficult and challenging because the distance for Bulgaria and Romania to cross to become member was much longer for historical, economic, political reasons. And a lot of hard work was necessary on both sides. It was also more difficult because after fifth round of enlargement and a big enlargement, there was on the side of the European Union, let's be honest, a kind of enlargement fatigue already at this time. That's why this was an enlargement that was particularly challenging to get it done. Also because the European Union at this time was in profound change. When the Treaty of Accession of Bulgaria and Romania was signed, it was the year 2005. It seems like ages ago, but that was the time where we're just concluding the Constitutional Convention. We're trying to have a constitutional treaty, and we didn't know whether we would have it or not. This is why, and that's really beautiful, ladies and gentlemen, if you look into the Act of Accession of Romania and Bulgaria, and I know you all know it by heart, it's the only Act of Accession, the only piece of primary EU law that refers today to the European Constitution. Because Romania and Bulgaria joined in there the European Constitutional Treaty, and only said if it is not enforced, then we join the treaties of the European Union. So the only two countries in the European Union who in their membership act, refer to the Constitutional Treaty of the European Union are Romania and Bulgaria, and I think that alone is worth remembering, recalling, and understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, the difficulty of the membership of application of Bulgaria and Romania is also expressed in the time that it took to complete it. For all the Austrians here in the room, because sometimes people think today you apply, the next day you're a member. Well, that was not even the case for Austria. In Austria, it took, Franz Nausnick knows it, how long did it take?
For the first application, when we first tried, it was in the 60s.
Okay, that's a very long answer. But I'm very formalistic. Application to, yes, 5.5 years between application and membership. 5.5 years for Austria. And for Romania and Bulgaria, it took 11.5 years, so almost the double of this period. So that shows how more difficult, how more challenging this process became, even though there was more, more experience on the side of the European Union. Therefore, I think in particular in these days, it's necessary to recall the moment when you get candidate status, it's the beginning of the work, not the end of the work. Ladies and gentlemen, you see also a lot of the challenges of the time if you read the opinion that the European Commission gave in 2005 on the application of Romania and Bulgaria when the negotiations were concluded. You see, this is something, it's the first time you see that it's even an opinion with a reservation. It says there is still a lot of further work to do. We will assist Bulgaria and Romania, but we even reserve the right to postpone membership for another year until 2008. It's the only time we ever said this, and that shows how the tension there was, how difficult this was, but also how far we have come, because we have not postponed the membership of Bulgaria and Romania. And I find particularly beautiful, ladies and gentlemen, what it says in this opinion signed by Olli Rehn, then the Enlargement Commissioner, and José Manuel Barroso, then the President of the Commission. What it says there, prospectively for the future of the European Union. It says there, one of the objectives of the European Union is to deepen the solidarity between its people while respecting their history, their culture, and their traditions. It's one of the few documents where it says it, solidarity in this way. Solidarity is today the fundamental theme of the European Union. We saw it in the Corona crisis. We see it now when we work together against the aggression by Russia. And ladies and gentlemen, we should not forget this. Solidarity is between people. In a few days, the Court of Justice of the European Union will rule on a matter that all of you have worked on a long time, and the Commission has worked a long time. That means the question how you treat workers from other member states when they have access to your social system. I hope that they will follow the opinion of the Commission, that there should be no discrimination, also not when it comes to child benefits or other social services, because we want that workers in the European Union are not only needed when we have shortages, but that they're respected in all economic cycles. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, what it says in this opinion, it says that the addition, the enlargement of the European Union by the Republic of Bulgaria and Romania will help to strengthen and safeguard peace and freedom in Europe. We should never forget that is the main objective of enlargement, to unite people, but also to bring stability, peace, and freedom to our continent. This is what is the strength of our process. It always leads afterwards, or in parallel, to a deepening of the European Union, because we cannot expand without deepening. But at the end of the day, it's a geopolitical project, and it's something that makes us together stronger, more solidarious, more peaceful, and hopefully also kinder to each other. I'm very happy to welcome you all here today, and I will now pass the floor to my colleague and friend Emil from Romania, who will introduce this panel from his perspective. Thank you very much, and have very good and interactive debates today. Thank you very much.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, Exzellenzen, lieber Martin, geschätzte Zuhörerinnen und geschätztes Publikum vor allem. Zunächst möchte ich Herrn Botschafter Selmayr und seinem Team für die Gelegenheit danken, dass wir heute zusammen mit Bulgarien über die 2007 Erweiterungswelle, über die Vervollständigung der großen Osterweiterung diskutieren können. Ich danke gleichfalls Herrn Paul Schmidt für seine Mitwirkung und nicht zuletzt meiner Kollegin, Frau Geschäftsträgerin Albena Getova. Lieber Martin, du hast dich in den verschiedenen Phasen deiner bemerkenswerten europäischen Karriere für die Wiedervereinigung des europäischen Kontinents inklusive für unsere Integration eingesetzt. Es gilt heute, dir als hochrangiger Mitarbeiter der Juncker-Kommission und zuletzt Generalsekretär unsere Wertschätzung zum Ausdruck zu bringen. Die Unterzeichnung des Beitrittsvertrages am 25. April 2005 erfolgte in Luxemburg, als Jean-Claude Juncker, der spätere Kommissionspräsident, dessen enger Vertrauter du warst, aus der Position des Premierministers Luxemburgs uns zur Seite stand. Es ist sicherlich kein Zufall, dass wir heute in diesem Saal auch die Person begrüßen dürfen, die seitens Rumäniens damals den Beitrittsvertrag in Luxemburg unterschrieben hat. Ich darf Herrn Premierminister und Außenminister AD, Professor Mihai Răzvan Ungureanu, meine große Hochachtung aussprechen, nicht zuletzt dafür, wie er den schwierigen Prozess der Beitrittsverhandlungen und die Vorbereitung Rumäniens für den Status des Mitglieds mitgestaltet hat. Mit dem Zeitpunkt des Beitrittes eröffnete sich ein neues Kapitel für Bulgarien und Rumänien. Unsere Länder tragen wesentlich zur Ausformulierung eines zukunftsfähigen europäischen Lebensmodells bei. Dies tun wir seit 15 Jahren unermüdlich. Im Grunde genommen bauen wir stets Brücken, nicht nur physische Brücken, wie etwas diejenige über die Donau, die noch nicht beendet worden sind, die unsere Länder und den wirtschaftlichen Kreislauf effizienter verbinden, sondern auch symbolische Brücken in Richtung aller Mitgliedstaaten, die uns vielleicht weniger kennen. Darüber hinaus aber auch in Richtung unserer Partner außerhalb der EU, die im Phänomen der europäischen Integration im Prozess der Europäisierung ihre Zukunftschance sehen. Unsere Bemühungen in der Rolle der Brückenbauers gegenüber den östlichen Partnern, wie schon seit einiger geräumiger Zeit auch gegenüber Westbalkan, verbinden uns mit wichtigen Partnerländern aus der EU, wie etwa der Republik Österreich. Auch die Initiative von Österreich und Rumänien entstand zum Beispiel die Donauraumstrategie, ein Instrument, welches die Donau nichts als trennendes, sondern verbindendes Element darstellt und dadurch die Aufmerksamkeit der gesamten Europäischen Union, insbesondere unter den heutigen Bedingungen, auf der Region des Schwarzen Meeres richtet. Verehrtes Publikum, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, im Sinne der europäischen Mehrsprachigkeit, und Sie sind exemplarisch, auch in diese Richtung, Martin, und aus Respekt für unsere englisch sprechenden Gäste, erlauben Sie mir hiermit auf Englisch zu wechseln. Dear participants, both online and those present here with us today, taking stock is the aim of our discussion today. You may ask yourselves, what happened in and to Romania during these first 15 years? To which extent did we internalize Europe? How Europeanized we are? And on the other hand, which are the benefits of Romania's integration for the Union itself? Though not synonymous, the concepts of European integration and Europeanization are deeply interrelated, and in the specific case of Romania, seem to confirm the very complex findings of the academic literature on the process of Europeanization. Let me quote a distinguished scholar, C. Radaily, who attempted a conceptual definition on the circular bottom-up and top-down processes of the interactions between a member state and the European Union as follows, quote, Europeanization is a set of processes of A, construction, B, diffusion, and C, institutionalization of formal and informal rules, procedures, policy paradigms, styles, ways of doing things, and shared beliefs and norms, which are first defined and consolidated in the making of EU decisions and then incorporated in the logic of domestic discourse, identities, political structures, and political policies. End quote. For those of you who know a bit about Romania's European journey, it goes without saying that the empirical findings of the Romanian case study would confirm this very exhaustive definition and borrow from the literature. These last 15 years have brought a profound change to the Romanian society and institutions, both economically and socially, resulting in a total reset of the paradigms and ways of functioning of our institution and society. Romania has passed its first maturity test as a member state, successfully chairing its first presidency of the Council of the European Union in the first half of 2019, with notable results and achievements. During those 6 months, our country led the European agenda under the motto, cohesion, a common European value. This slogan proves to be more real than ever within the context of the unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine. It is our belief that only through cohesion and resilience, both internally and externally, we can enjoy prosperity and security in the EU. Our journey till the moment of accession was everything else than easy, but easy, with huge challenges for our institutions and for the people. This journey of preparations and transformation did not stop with the 1st of January 2007. It goes on and aims at eliminating all the pending leftovers we need to deal with. As to the leftovers, Romania has always acknowledged its shortcomings and has shown commitment to redressing them by adopting effective and swift measures in the fight against corruption, respect for the rule of law, and the absorption of European funds. As a matter of fact, Romania is one of the champions in the EU in combating corruption, if you consider the high number of cases dealt with and the list of high-level politicians being prosecuted for acts of corruption. However, as we owned up to these shortcomings, we also expect the EU partners to recognize our contribution to the European project. It is time for the cooperation and verification mechanism to be lifted and Schengen formally completed. The way Romania has handled the Ukrainian refugee situation, considering that our country has the longest EU border with Ukraine, it's yet another strong argument that Romania functions as de facto Schengen member state. Thus, it deserves to fully join the free movement area. Key institutions at European level recognize that Romania and Bulgaria, by the way, meet the criteria for de jure Schengen membership, and our commitment has been clearly demonstrated while successfully securing EU external border, fighting human trafficking, etc. for many years. We see our contribution to the European projects through the filter of our geopolitical situation. We stand for the European Union in full solidarity with its neighbors, just to illustrate our engagement. More than 1 million refugees from Ukraine crossed the borders these last 3 months. We sheltered several thousand and did our best to temporarily integrate them into our society, which welcomed them with open arms. The port of Constanța functions today as a regional hub for the Ukrainian grain exports, thus securing the so-called European Solidarity Corridor, in addition to the terrestrial ones. Lieber Martin, liebe Albena, meine Damen und Herren, sei es mir verziehen, es war nicht meine Absicht, den mir zugesprochenen Zeitrahmen zu sprengen, Rumäniens Weg in die freie, menschenrechts- und demokratieachtende Welt des politischen Westens war aber für mich persönlich eine Herzenssache und Gegenstand meiner früheren journalistischen Arbeit für fast 2 Jahrzehnte. Als Mitarbeiter und später Redaktionsleiter beim Radio Freies Europa und dann Deutsche Welle in München und Köln habe ich mich mit meinen bescheidenen Mitteln stets dafür engagiert und gleichzeitig, dass die Idee eines freien Europas im Land selbst die Hoffnung aufrecht erhält und gleichzeitig, dass Rumäniens Annäherung an das politische Westen so gut wie möglich erleichtert und vorangebracht wird. Es ist daher meine tiefe und persönliche Freude, heute in diesem Rahmen über die ersten 15 Jahre des Mitgliedstaates Rumäniens zu diskutieren. Haben Sie herzlichen Dank.
A very warm welcome and a very good morning also from our side here. The ambassador has said that it's time for the discussion, and if the ambassador says that it's time for the discussion, it's really the time for the discussion. Let me welcome to this Europa Club Special here from the House of the European Union in Vienna. Let me welcome all of you here in this beautiful location of the European Commission and the European Parliament, but also everyone in front of their screens that is following us. Now, title of today's event stands for itself, I would say. 15 years of EU membership of Bulgaria and Romania, taking stock and looking ahead. Taking stock, that's the first panel, and then looking ahead and thinking about the implications of the war against Ukraine for European integration will be on the second panel of today's event. We will start by discussing Bulgaria's and Romania's contribution to European integration, and we will do that with a very fine lineup of people that I would like to introduce. Let me introduce our guest from Bucharest, from Romania. She is connected via the internet with us here. She cannot be here physically with us, but we hope to see you soon in Vienna. Welcome, Florina Alina Padeanu.
Good morning.
Good morning. Florina is a career diplomat, if I may say so. She started in the Romanian Foreign Ministry, I think in 1998. Spent a long time working for the permanent representation of Romania to the European Union, starting from 2003. So that was a very, very exciting times. You also were part of the European External Action Service, and since the beginning of this year, you are advisor or state counselor for external relations and EU affairs at the Chancellery of the Prime Minister in Romania. Very good to have you. Thank you for joining us. And to my right-hand side here, Atanas Pekanov. Hello, Atanas. Atanas is an economist by education. He works for the Austrian Institute for Economic Research. In German, the abbreviation would be WIFO, which is quite well known here. You've started as an economist and as a researcher there in 2017. But you all know, of course, that in last year, he was back in Sofia for the caretaker government as a deputy prime minister of Bulgaria, where he spent 7 months. in a technical government, trying to help and succeeding to help the country in difficult times. Atanas, thank you for joining us. And to my left-hand side, Sebastian Schäfer, native from Germany, I think from Bavaria, expert on Central Europe, lecturer at the University of Economics, but of course also director at the Austrian Institute of the Danube region and Central Europe, which was already mentioned. The Danube strategy was already mentioned by the ambassador. My name is Paul Schmidt from the Austrian Society of European Politics here in Vienna, and I have the pleasure to chair this discussion. And this discussion is going to be very interactive, so if anyone behind or in front of the screen would like to ask a question or send a comment, please do so. I will have my mobile phone here. No, it's on the seat, but I will I will get it. And just send me your comments, and I won't be playing with my telephone, but if you send a comment, I will try to get into the discussion. But also here in the room of the European House, please feel free to come into discussion. Now, let me kick the discussion off with Florina. Florina, the ambassador also already referred to the question of what Romania contributed to European integration in these 15 years. Can I start out with you? What is your assessment? How do you see Romania's contribution here?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me in this event. I hope you can hear me. Well, I will never dare to contradict the Romanian ambassador. So I can fully agree to what His Excellency Hurezeanu just mentioned about the added value of Romania's accession to the EU. And I have to admit that addressing the angle of Romania's contribution to the EU is a bit awkward from my perspective. I usually talk to Romanian audiences about the benefits of the EU accession. And now I have a bit to change the perspective. But in the end, I think it's not that complicated, because what is good for Romania is good for the EU and vice versa. And what I usually tell to the audiences here is that being a member state for 15 years brought material and immaterial benefits. The material benefits are the obvious investments in infrastructure, in social services, in cohesion. The immaterial benefits are the Europeanization that was mentioned. And this is very important, because I think the Romanian society transformed since Romania joined the EU. The freedom of movement, the interaction with the societies in other member states, the flow of other EU citizens coming to Romania, working here, living here, it's just allowing the Romanian citizens to be better connected to the European mindset. And as Ambassador Zelmaier mentioned, Romania and the vicinity to the Black Sea brings to the EU this perspective of a region that by now was not so present in the maps of Europe. Black Sea was just another sea of Europe. Now, actually, the Black Sea is an important part of the European strategy. And we see it these days in the context of the conflict in Ukraine. We see it from not only from the security perspective, we see the importance from the economic perspective, as the port of Constanța plays a major role in facilitating the exports of Ukrainian grains towards countries in north of Africa or elsewhere. So you see, the benefits are on both sides. The benefit of the Romanian and the Romanian society, the Romanian citizens and the Romanian society and economy, but are also the benefits of Europe. I mentioned the Black Sea, so it's the one of the benefits is this strategic benefit, which is real. When we were building our case towards the EU accession, Romania and if I recall correctly, Bulgaria too, we were using quite a lot this strategic argument. Our position at the Black Sea, in the Western Balkans, our status as very stable nations and as poles of stability for a rather turbulent vicinity, and at that time that vicinity was the Western Balkans. Now this neighborhood is really like it's really at the borders of today's Europe. We speak of the war in Ukraine, about the instability that is generated by the Russian military aggression. And instability not only in terms of Ukraine, but also the impact on the Republic of Moldova and the impact for the Europe as such. The European Council speaks of the energy impact. We speak of sanctions and how we will go about sanctions and the implementation of sanctions and their impact on our societies. So all this creates an impact. And all this shows that it's important that at the Black Sea, we have two nations, which are EU member states, NATO allies, and they contribute in terms of stability and prosperity to the whole of Europe. So this is one contribution. The second contribution is the contribution of the Romanian citizens. The Romanian citizens contribute to the growth, to the economic growth in other member states by working by providing service to the benefit of those economies. We also contribute by offering a positive investment framework. And of course, there is no secret that our trade is very much connected to Europe. It's 73%. So we are also a partner for the business, not only a partner for the EU institutions. And when I wanted to refer to the EU institutions because the third benefit is that of Romania as a partner in EU policy making. Our strategy since our accession was to cooperate, to find solutions, even if those solutions were not perfect to us. But here in Bucharest, we are deeply convinced that you cannot build a strong Europe without making a compromise that will allow everyone to feel happy about. So I think this is a very direct contribution we have to the building of Europe as we have it today. And I think Romania joined the EU at a crucial moment, and I'm saying it not only because I think Romania is super important. I'm saying it because Europe is super important for the continent and proved to be super important for the continent since exactly 2007. You recall 2008, 2009, the financial crisis and the instability. The Europeans learned a lot of lessons, and the most important was the need to be solidary. And the solidarity was shown almost a decade later in the context of the COVID crisis. The RRF, what we have now as reflected at national level as the National Recovery and Resilience Nation plans, are basically a reflection of the European solidarity that stems from what should have happened a decade ago There was no political appetite to invest. We had to learn more. We had to learn more in terms of solidarity also in the context of the migration crisis in 2016 and later on. So all these lessons learned were to the benefit of Europe and also to the benefit of the member states, including Romania, including Bulgaria.
Alina, can I ask you a follow-up question? You have mentioned the three elements where Romania clearly contributed to the European Union. Mentioned the geostrategic contributions, the Romanians that are all over the European labor market helping, and of course the positive attitude towards EU policy making, where Romania always tried to reach a solution and to reach a compromise. That's very close to the Austrian approach, I would say. We always look for the compromise, sometimes even before we know the problem, but that's another story. It was interesting to hear the ambassador also to talk about the bridge building. That's also very close to the Austrian approach, and I thank him for this. Now, but the ambassador, and that's why I'm now able to refer to this as well, because the ambassador started with it. Where do you see room for improvement? Ambassador mentioned rule of law, absorption capacity, Schengen. What else can Romania actually contribute in that respect to the European Union?
Well, it's because you referred to Schengen, to rule of law. Yes, I think for Romania, there is room to become Schengen. The ambassador mentioned Schengen. This is a goal we have since 2011, and we're still waiting for a decision to be taken with respect to the enlargement of Schengen. And of course, this contribution to the security of the Europe's eastern border brought by Romania is confirming that basically Romania acts as a de facto Schengen member. And in terms of rule of law, as you mentioned, CVM, I think we have now to upgrade and speak of the rule of law at the EU level. This is a bit the argument that we always bring to the table in our discussions in the Council, with the Member States, with the European Commission. The EU is it's built on the rule of law. So this has to remain at the core of our action. Romania is really contributing and is trying to reform itself in order to be a firm contributor to the rule of law at European level. And recently there were reforms undertaken in Bucharest that will basically ensure what the European Commission repeatedly recommended: an independent judiciary and a sustainable independent judiciary. So that's this is in terms of additional contribution and the link you made to the rule of law. Speaking of an contribution, I think you mentioned the economic impact. And I referred to the investment framework. I referred also to the role of the port of Constanța, and I would like also to refer also to the role of Danube as an important pathway for the transport in Europe. And we know that here we are not speaking of the technicality of what is a waterway and what is the impact of a waterway. We speak of the blood we speak of the mobility as the blood for the EU economy.
Oh, Alina, let's leave it there for the moment, and let me move over to our other panelists. Atanas Bekanov, how do you see the Bulgarian track record for the last 15 years within the European Union? How would you assess the performance? How do you see the contribution of Bulgaria to European integration?
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear organizers, dear excellencies, thank you so much. It's a huge pleasure for me to speak here today at the Haus der EU, in one of the geographic centers, I would say, of Europe. In Austria, one of the most important partners that we in Eastern Europe have had on our journey in the past decades. It's been 15 years. 15 years is almost half of my life so far, and of my schoolmates, of my generation. And Europe is irreplaceable, it's essential for my generation. It is where we went on to visit, then to study, then to work, then to find friends, then to maybe make families, and to improve ourselves. When I came here for the first time in Vienna to study, 12 years ago, it was a cold morning like this one, it was raining, and it felt very, maybe alone and distant and weird for my friends. When you come to a new place, it's always like this. It's weird, you don't feel maybe so comfortable, even if it's such a nice place as Vienna. And I think maybe our two countries also felt like this at the beginning. But as time passed by, I believe we have become now very confident and very reliable partners of the EU that can work together on our shared goals, on our shared common beliefs in the European Union. Europe has given us a lot. I think we sometimes underestimate this or take this for granted. On university campuses, on workplaces, we could improve ourselves. Many of us could go and study in Vienna, in Madrid, Rome, Rotterdam, Berlin. We could find friends on trips, on common initiatives. We could engage in what we believed was important for the society, for the societies, for the member states, and for us as individuals. This has helped us get better opportunities, improve ourselves, and yes, maybe yes, also bring back that to our home countries, and therefore contribute to improving them as well. This is how I see cooperation. You improve yourself, and then you pass it by to others. I had the great privilege last year to serve in the caretaker government in Bulgaria in the role of Deputy Prime Minister for EU funding. It was not an easy job. It was very difficult and long negotiations with the European Commission on the Recovery and Resilience Plan, and I thought very often, why are these negotiations so difficult? Well, it was because both sides wanted to achieve the best for Europe, for our common goals, and finding consensus takes time. It is sometimes difficult, because we want to achieve what is best, the best outcome, and because we all, I believe really, we all strive for this shared prosperity, which is a main goal of our union. I have to say, yes, the union still has many problems. We have to confess that this is true. We have our differences. Living together in a community, it requires coordination, it requires making compromises, it requires patience. Living together is not so easy. And we must not hide the fact that some citizens are worried about these challenges. The last years have also exacerbated these worries. It was first the global financial crisis, then the euro crisis, then the pandemic, then the current very tragic events unfolding in the Ukraine, current bout of inflation. Citizens are worried. And we should not neglect or ignore this. No, it is the main task of politicians and technocrats and policymakers to address this, to resolve these issues. I have seen these worries firsthand. In Bulgaria, I would say there is a considerable mass of citizens that have a concern that maybe globalization was not so fair, that maybe the last decades economic developments were not always fair and unjust, and this we see also in other places in the world. We should be open and we should think about how we can address this. I have saw it also during the negotiations on the Recovery and Resilience Plan, where some citizens have concern about the Green Deal. They see it more as a challenge. I see it more as an opportunity. And it was important to persuade them that, no, out of this, something better will come. A transformation of your region, not a risk to your jobs or your livelihoods. But we have to take these difficult steps to find consensus. If there is no societal consensus, if some decisions, any decision, is taken and seen as being taken somewhere outside, somewhere in the ivory tower of an institution, and not by societal consensus, this actually does not help us our coexistence. It may even harm us. And it does not help us move forward. And move forward is what is essential right now. This is crucial for Europe. You know, when you go to Brussels, you see everywhere there are construction sites. And this is how our union still is. It's still a construction site. Europa ist eine Baustelle. We have laid the foundations, but there is so much more to do. And this is where we are right now. We have to move together forwards on the things that are essential. And here, deeper cooperation can help us. Deeper cooperation between ourselves, it is our main contribution. This is a success story. All of these people, as Professor Selmayr rightly said, all of us together, this is the diversity, this is the common contribution of all of us towards the shared goals of the European Union. And deeper cooperation does not deprive us of our sovereignty. No, actually, in the 21st century, true sovereignty is not about just taking some decision that you like. No, it's about reaching the final outcome that is the best. And this very often includes sitting together, thinking together, finding the right compromise to move forward together. And the pandemic has shown us we can do that. Europe has found in the pandemic what is essential. We have seen this with the common order of the vaccines. We have seen this with the Recovery and Resilience Plan. This was our main common response so that we didn't let this crisis amplify and become worse and worse. No, actually the other way around. The common response has helped us to defend European households and firms against this crisis.
Atanas, if you were to choose 3 elements where Bulgaria contributed in the last, just 3 elements out of many where Bulgaria contributed in the last 15 years, what would that be from your point of view?
So first and foremost, I really believe the main contribution is people. Young and not so young, ambitious, talented people coming here, helping, and then also helping back home. This is how cooperation should look like. This is the first. Second, I think we have a very good tradition in some disciplines in science, mathematics. Just last month, a great new institute for mathematics and AI was opened in Sofia, in Bulgaria, where people from all of Eastern Europe, but also Western Europe can come. It is deemed, and I think it has the fate also to become a kind of an European MIT. It has been opened by scientists also from ETH Zurich, where we see also the cooperation with either non-EU members. And in this area, we can strive for so much more. And I think, finally, the diversity. Expanding our union has given us the opportunity to see many more viewpoints. And as I said, we should never neglect them. We should try to find the best way possible to actually address the challenges that different people might see. This is the way to move forward. And we'll see that this would not come in the way of some old school federalism, changing the treaties, going through very, very difficult legislative changes. No, this would go in the way of practical federalism. This would go in the way of addressing the needs of today, the hot topics where we can actually move forward, where we have enough a critical mass of acceptance that we should move forward, and this is how we'll make the union stronger.
Okay, so it is not by institutional change, but actually by practical deeds and by decisions that bring legitimacy to European integration, so to speak. Thank you, Atanas. Let me bring Sebastian now into our discussion here. Now, looking at what we've just heard from our Romanian and Bulgarian colleague, and also thinking about what Martin and the ambassador said before, that the geopolitical dimension is gaining in importance, but there are also, of course, the accession criteria and the difficulties and the complex process of enlargement, which still leave an impact here. What is your assessment of the contribution of both countries to European integration?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, to the Romanian Embassy for facilitating that I can be here today. It's a great pleasure to see such a lot of distinguished people here in this house, where actually, for the first time when I was in Vienna, at that time I was working in Berlin, I was invited by IDM to speak at the conference in this house. It was on the signing, or rather not signing, of the association agreement between the European Union and Ukraine, which more or less, if we look back, started all the things that you are going to talk about in the second panel. Anyway, as you mentioned when you introduced me that I'm from Bavaria, I, at this occasion, often quote, I call him a philosopher, he was a comedian, and he said, everything has been said, but not by everything has been said, but not by everyone. And it's a bit hard after all these recollections of contributions to make a unique contribution. I'm nevertheless going to try, in the sense that, first of all, I think it's very important that we talk more and more about what actually member countries bring to the European Union. We should not so much focus on what actually these countries can get out of the European Union, because they are part of it. And what we make out of the European Union is each and everyone's individual contribution. And then, of course, if we think about and maybe even build this bridge also to the further discussion here, if I may use this pun, that we have, of course, the situation that has been described geopolitically. Just imagine if those two countries would not be a member of the European Union, and especially, of course, also NATO at the moment, at this very moment, what this would mean for our continent. And when we talk about the contribution to the European Union, something that we maybe can learn also here is that, for instance, the trust in European institutions is still twice as high in Romania and Bulgaria than in the own government. And this is a clear sign that supranational governance, of course it has differentiated reasons, but supranational governance is something that is seen valuable here and as a safeguarding mechanism, which is something that I think we are lacking in certain member countries, for instance in Austria, but also, for instance, in the so-called motor of European integration, like France and like Germany. We need to look much more into the center of this union. We need to look much more into Central Europe, and then here especially also this contribution which has been mentioned, that it opened up the Black Sea. I think that European integration has always centered around water. We had the first river of integration with the River Rhine, which was very important. And now, if what our late chairman, Dr. Erhard Busek, always said, that the Danube is the second river of European integration. And symbolically for this, I had the pleasure to hold a lecture at the University of Russe for Europe Day. And if you look at this, this is embodying the European integration and the River Danube, connecting the two countries, and especially here the two cities, Russe and Giurgiu.
Sebastian, as an observer not from the outside, basically, because you're not a national neither of Romania nor of Bulgaria, you've mentioned that the trust in European politics is higher than in national politics. Now, what is your assessment of this? Is this because the European performance is doing so well, or is this because the confidence in national politics is so low?
Well, of course, I mean, there's more to it, as I said, and yes, of course, the reason for this is certainly rooted also in the fact that the trust in the national government is can be very much improved from a better performance from those governments. But when we look at the bright side here, I would say the positive aspect is that apparently the European Union is seen as more trustworthy to guarantee that what those governments might still lack in the region. We also have to mention, I think we are here to also discuss the challenges and not only the positive aspects, is that we have also seen Euroscepticism on the rise in Romania and Bulgaria. When we look at the latest Eurobarometer, we see the biggest increase of the EU being viewed negatively, for instance, in Bulgaria. It raised by 11 points. It's still around 20%. Actually, the negative view in Austria of the European Union is higher than in Bulgaria and Romania, but nevertheless, this is a sign, and this is something that we should take into account when we talk about this. And this regional cooperation aspect and the contribution that has been made within the European integration is something that we should focus much more on, because there is not only the cultural and the people aspect, which is very, very valid, but there's also, for instance, something that we are overlooking, how the societies are also bringing things on the agenda when we think about the Western Balkans. The first time for, I think it was even 15 years as well, that there was a summit of the 6 countries was during the Bulgarian presidency back in 2018. And the regional aspect also, when we look at Romania now, with all the tensions growing, especially in a neighboring country, not only Ukraine, we should not overlook the Republic of Moldova and the tensions that are rising in Transnistria. Romania is a guarantee for sort of stability in its neighboring country, and also brings the Eastern Partnership closer to the discussion of European integration, which is in itself a very important contribution.
Thank you, Sebastian. I would do one more quick round here on the panel, if I may, because there are already questions coming in via social media, and I'm sure that people in the audience would like to ask. Florina, what is your take on this, what you have just heard? How do you assess the trust in national governments and in the national Romanian government? And is there a trend of new Euroscepticism taking place?
I wouldn't say it's a trend. I would rather say it's the result of the hybrid warfare that Europe was exposed in the last couple of years. The Euroscepticism and the misinformation are very much related. And if we look back at the start, when in Europe we started to feel the heat of misinformation, I don't think it's pure coincidence when we think that the annexation, the illegal annexation of Crimea, happened in 2014, and in 2016 we had a lot of disinformation campaigns about migratory flows at Europe's level. So there is, I think, a silver thread in all this, and Euroscepticism, not only in Romania or Bulgaria, but also elsewhere in Europe, is on the rise, due also to our lack of a sufficient responsiveness to disinformation. Of course, a second argument may be very much related to the pandemic, to the measures taken during the COVID pandemic, which were not very popular at all levels of the society. This created some frustrations. There was a lot of narrative related to the freedoms. So in a way, the fact that Europe was seen also at the forefront of some measures brought also this downside of Euroscepticism. So we have to look a bit at the source of Euroscepticism and address through the right solutions. That would be first more proactive attitude towards disinformation and a better narrative about what we collectively do at EU level.
Atanas talking about a more proactive attitude in terms of European integration and by national politics. That's also an issue that, of course, which we have in every member state, not least here in Austria. There's a question coming in for you, apart from what we have been talking about right now. The question is, what is Bulgaria's contribution to the next enlargement of the EU, namely to the Western Balkans? I don't have to be more explicit. Please, you have the floor.
I think I mentioned it in a sentence, but I will say it again. Our further path together, it is together. We belong together. But the further path moves only when we have reached societal consensus, only when we have persuaded citizens that they will not be deprived of something. It could also be about the Green Deal, it could be about something else. But as long as we have not reached this consensus that some institution is not taking the decisions instead of them, it's very hard to move. And it can actually set us on a wrong path. It might lead some scars. You know, there are these narratives back home also about EU membership, which we try also to, I would say, fight against. That it has deprived us of some, for example, our nuclear power stations, other things that were taken as part of the agreement, which are not true. But these narratives are there, and we should not neglect them. We should not ignore them. We should first address them, and only then we can move forward.
What could be a positive narrative to convince the public that it is actually time to start negotiations with Northern Macedonia?
So I believe here, so I'm an economist. I can talk long about the benefits of trade integration. I believe
so that the people would understand you.
Exactly. But this is what I wanted to say. There's a very nice saying by Jacques Delors: nobody falls in love in the single market. So people don't care so much about all of these statistics, economic convergence, trade gains, all of this. No, they care about real opportunities. And when we tell them maybe we got a lot of real opportunities to improve ourselves, to improve our potential, and we should give it also to others, because they also want this. They also want this for their children, to go abroad and get better education, better opportunities, better life standards, and then give it back. And this is the way we can move forward, because these are the real things that people care about.
Thank you very much. Sebastian, do you want to come in? What is your take on this? How can we get out of this impasse in terms of EU enlargement? Do you see a new momentum for enlargement now that other countries are pushing for candidate status? How do you assess the situation?
I would say yes, there's a window of opportunity right now resulting from the membership application of Ukraine, but also Moldova and Georgia. Importance here is, of course, that we pay attention to the fact that there are countries, Northern Macedonia has been mentioned, that are waiting to actually open negotiations for quite some time. They have been waiting since 2005 to actually become a candidate country. Then the name issue was resolved, and then of course this paradoxic thing happened that Bulgaria was, through the presidency, advocating the Western Balkans enlargement, but at the same time, when the issues then were resolved, they were actually blocking further progress. So what we need to be careful on the one hand side in the current situation is that we are not advancing and overlooking maybe certain points in one possible candidate countries to the expense of others that have been in this sort of waiting room for far too long. There is a danger that we send a fatal signal that you have to have a war to be recognized as a potential member, because this is something that the EU and especially the member states could have done at the start of the Eastern Partnership back in 2009. We shouldn't have waited until this war started, that they are recognized as potential candidate countries. And now we are in this sort of conundrum that you should, of course, use the window of opportunity to foster European integration as much as possible in the Western Balkans, but also the accession trio, associate trio of the Eastern Partnership. But at the same time, certain backslidings in single countries must not go to the expense of others. So we should not view this as enlargement blocks, but look very carefully at the individual possibilities and steps that countries are taking. But yes, the technical and very slow process of European enlargement that has been described in the case of Austria, 5.5 years. In the case of Bulgaria, much longer, double the time. And then even if we mention Croatia, the last successful one, very, very long as well. There is something that needs to change, and we should use this window of opportunity maybe now.
Thank you. Let's open the floor here to the audience, or if you at home or in your office or wherever you are, you want to send a question or a remark, please do so via the social media, and I already got some, and I will try to get them into the discussion as soon as I can. Who would like to start? Let's start here with the first round of questions. Let me collect some. There's a question over here, 2 questions.
Günther Fellinger, yes, Romania's, Bulgaria's EU and NATO accession is probably the best thing we ever did in the European Union. Congratulations. I have 3 small questions. Why didn't you recognize Kosovo? Secondly, why didn't you then build the highways to Moldova and to Ukraine? Because I see it has a big lack of infrastructure and it would be really very good. And why are you not in the Eurozone? Is it the EU blocking you, or do you don't want to be in the Eurozone?
Or is it criteria which you have to fulfill? That's also a possibility. Franz Nauschnik, please, yes?
Thank you very much. You mentioned the first river of integration, the Rhine, and the second, the Danube. We just recently had a meeting in Regensburg with people from logistics. And frankly speaking, we have a lot of catching up to do on the Danube. If you compare, for example, the harbor of Duisburg, which was comparing it to our harbors, it's, how should I say, a bit bigger, and we have a lot of catching up to do. And frankly speaking, shouldn't we change the framework, because we have a Rhine Convention which seems to work quite well, and we have a Danube Convention where still Russia is a member, which is, how should I say, has some room of improvement, and shouldn't we try to improve it and take the Rhine Convention as an example?
Thank you very much. Maybe on my right-hand side, if there is a question. Yes, please. The microphone is coming.
Thank you very much. The first word, I would like to ask my Lands people to excuse me who are serve at the moment to the state of Bulgaria, because I'm now a private person. And I will say that it's rich time to take out the consensus principle. You can speak, you have a consensus between 2, 3, 5, not between 27. I'm ashamed about Bulgaria with this veto against Macedonia. Nobody on the Balkan, nobody in the Europe, nobody in the whole region is near to the Bulgarian and Macedonian. 2 million people. Why Bulgaria do it? Why? Having a look about the whole earth, about the wars and the continents, looking Bulgaria, look at Macedonia, what is the sense? What is the mean to block Macedonia? I don't understand why Albania with Macedonia. I don't ask the auditorium, I only ask for excuse, because the people who are served to the state are not allowed to speak about this. But by my heart, I think as a lawyer, maybe as a former servant to the state, it's time, and this is my message to the representative of European Union, bring to the European Union, it's time to take out the consensus principle. It's time to have majority principle. This is the only one right principle in a democracy.
Thank you very much. We will take another question, if I may, over there from Ambassador Reiweger, who was Austrian ambassador to Bucharest and to Sofia. Yes.
Thank you very much. The discussion here is very much in the framework of there is an entity, European Union, and there are other entities which are the member states. So the discussion was about what do I get from this side or what do I contribute. What I would appreciate was a discussion of what would we do together on certain important policies like common security, maybe labor laws, the Green Deal. This would be discussion that is relevant for the future of the European Union.
Very well, thank you, Atanas. I think it's logical to give you the floor. I think there were some of the questions addressed to Bulgaria. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the interest and for the interesting questions. Let me start there. I cannot speak in any manner regards the position of the current government. I can speak only in my own capacity. Regarding the questions, I think, so I'm not going to speak so far behind in history, but we are actually one of the first countries that recognized Kosovo back in the days. So I think on this, maybe I misunderstood the question. Okay. Good, so we clear that out. On infrastructure, I completely agree, actually. And I was in charge of EU funding, and I think there is a widespread... we understand now that there was not enough strategic thinking in the infrastructure projects, and the regional disbalances in Bulgaria have actually maybe increased in the last years. So this was not the best approach, and I think this comes with the fact that maybe institutions were not so strong as necessary, and they didn't recognize how important that would be. So I agree that there is something to be done there. Highways, definitely. The north of Bulgaria is right now not well developed infrastructure, and this is something that we hope in the coming period will be addressed much better. On the Eurozone, here again we are at this position that I, as an economist, see more benefits of joining, but there are many people that have fear. More than 60% are against Bulgaria joining. I think we should still join, but we should not join if people will then say in 5 years, oh, but this increased inflation even further, this doubled inflation in times of very high inflation. It will not happen because we know from other countries joining that this is not what happens. But this is the shared belief right now. On the criteria, yes, we now I think we fulfill them. So we are hoping that we join soon, and I think this is the best path forward, and we should try to do it as soon as possible. Now there was the question again on North Macedonia. So yes, my personal opinion is that we should do our best to start and to get out of this veto as soon as possible. But there is a decision by Parliament 3 or 4 years ago with huge majority. It is not, neither it was in the power of a technocratic government that is not democratically elected to come in power for a couple of months and to say, now we will scrap this decision. It's a democratic decision. The Parliament is, in the end, the most important institution that we have in a democracy. So we cannot scrap it right away and say, no, but we have another view, even if it's the right view. This is our democracies. Yes, they are slow. They are slow. That's true. But this is the only way that we can move forward, I think. Then finally, on Fran's question, thank you. Yeah, I think we are not using the Danube enough. We should do much more cooperation on the Danube, and there were some very good examples that this is something that unites us, many countries, also Central Europe and Eastern Europe, and this is something that so far we haven't used. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Florina, there were some questions probably addressed to you. What is your opinion? How would you respond to those questions?
Well, in the case of Kosovo, I think I should recall the principal position of Romania that Romania took from the beginning, and it's related to the interpretation of the respect of international law. According to the Romanian parliament and government, territorial partitions cannot be unilateral. So this is the principal position, and this is why we insist on having a productive Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. With respect to the highways, what I could highlight is that for the first time in many, many years, the European Commission is now integrating Bulgaria and Ukraine in the core maps of TEN-T. So we do hope that the development of Romania's infrastructure will have very soon the prospect of having a match in Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova. The euro, it's a similar position to the one of Bulgaria. There isn't much traction at the level of the citizens, and the criteria are also a problem. Danube, thank you for bringing it up. It's a project that is intensely discussed with our Romanian counterparts. Our ambition is to have solutions in place that will allow the Danube River to be used 365 days a year, and there is a project which is lagging behind for almost 10 years. It's the Fast Danube project. Now I think we will have a solution with our Bulgarian friends that will allow the implementation of this project. I cannot speak of what is happening in Germany or in Austria, but I do hope that all the riparian countries will basically support a better use for the Danube River as an integration river. And just one, if you allow me, just one comment about EU and member states as different entities. Yes, I fully agree. I don't think we are different entities. This is why when I referred to the contribution of Romania, I also said that there is a coin with two faces. It's what the Romania contributes and how EU contributes to Romania's development. So I think this is a bit the logic. We do not have the benefits for us, but we have also benefits that are reflected at the EU level.
Florina, a follow-up question for you, which is coming via social media. The question is basically what can be done to conquer social challenges, to respond to the social challenges. It is interesting to see that Atanas said, and you've also mentioned that one of the contributions of the Romanians is the workforce, which is all over the European Union, and Atanas emphasized that those people bring back experience to their home countries. But if so many people actually leave, how can you actually make up with this brain drain? Is there a return of the brain, so to speak, or how can you conquer those social challenges, which implies this development? And the second question, which has arrived to us, is what about trade unions? What about the representation of people's interests? What about their collective bargaining force? How How do you improve those? How do you respond to those social challenges?
Well, this is quite a complex answer, because of course and I would address it from two perspectives. First is the perspective of the brain drain, of Romanians coming back. Yes, there are Romanians coming back. I think there is a trend that is reversing, and there was European polls that actually showed very recently that the Romanian youth is not willing to move and work somewhere else. So I think this was a trend. It was very much this migration and the brain drain was also the result of the economic development in Romania. There is no secret that people will always move there where they see more opportunities in short term. Now I think they start to see there are more opportunities in their home country. So there is this young generation that will stay and will build Romania.
Thank you, Sebastian. Maybe which question would you like to answer? Maybe the one on the Danube Convention. How do you see that framework? How can it be rethought, renewed? And what is your take on qualified majority voting, knowing that this is not the magical recipe for everything, but still it pops up in every discussion?
Yeah. I'll take the second one first, because the easy answer is QMV is the only possibility and is the future. We need to get rid of unanimity when it comes to not only the questions of enlargement, but also foreign policy and security policy. I think this is the way to go. Now, with the Danube, it's a little bit more complicated, because it presents one of the challenges when we talk about the cooperation of Bulgaria and Romania, because it's also up to them to speed up the process to make it actually usable, as it has been mentioned. 365 days. We see now that this is it has been mentioned as this bloodline when it comes to exporting Ukrainian grain now, where we could have much more potential, and we didn't use that yet. Now, the positive contribution again, and I have to disagree with the honorable ambassador here. I don't think we are talking here about two different entities. I think it is exactly discussions like this that show that there is mutual benefit, and it's not mutually exclusive. It's a shared benefit that is created here. And one of these shared benefits is the EU SDR, which was initiated by Austria and Romania. And within the EU SDR, one of the priority areas is actually waterways, which will hopefully contribute to alleviating the transport situation, not given this current situation with the attack of the Russian Federation on Ukraine, but with solving the transport challenges within the framework of the European Green Deal itself. But for this, we need much more either upgrade of the macro-regional strategies. They're more than just the EUSDR. Of course, from our perspective, it's the most important one. But nevertheless, so either...
What do you mean by upgrade? What would that imply?
That would imply that you, for instance, give a much bigger focus on regional development and contribution in the macro-regional strategies. Right now, there is still this 3-no rule, no new funding, no new legislation, we need to focus much more on the potential that is within these macro-regional strategies, on on the institutional level. So we have advisory bodies in the institutional framework, and then we have macro-regional strategies, and then we also have regional strategies like the Black Sea Synergy, and a lot of them tackle the same issues, have the same target countries, the same member countries, if you want to call them like this, but we have not additional output, and we need to create more synergies that provide output, not more initiatives.
Let me finish up with the last quick round. What do you expect for the next? What would be the one thing that you would wish for the next 15 years of EU membership of Bulgaria and Romania?
That you learn something new every day, and I learned now that in this membership legislation, the constitution was mentioned, and it's the only two countries where it was mentioned. So for me, my wish would be that it doesn't have to be 15 years, it should be much, much faster. But my wish here would be on this perspective that we have a treaty revision. It doesn't necessarily have to be a constitution, but we need a treaty revision to be ready to tackle the challenges that have been there and that we have far too much sidelined and far too often ignored. And then within this, instead of constantly talking about the challenges and the shortcomings and you know, if you read some headlines, you could even see that the European Union is lying on the ICU, the intensive care unit. But we should much more say, I see you, referring to we see the contribution that Romania, we see the contribution that Bulgaria, we see the contribution that each and every member country is bringing to the European Union. And then in 15 years, we don't have to talk about these challenges, maybe.
No, and the good thing is that the Constitution is already in the accession treaty, so we just have to reread them. Okay, Atanas, what is your take on this? What would you like to see to happen soon in this relationship, Bulgaria and Romania, as essential parts of the European Union?
We can always go back to Monnet. He says we need Europe for that what is essential, that what member states cannot do alone. And in the 21st century, the list of those things, it grows by every day. In this globalized world, the challenges, we can only solve them together. So we need these positive narratives to show that we have done so. We have done so now in the crisis, we have done so now in the pandemic, and this is how we can move forward. And I really believe in this approach of what one would call practical federalism. We move on the areas where we see, there is something that we can deliver to citizens, and they will recognize it right away. This is the way that we can also bring more credibility to our institutions and also move.
So it's probably advancing by decision-making, by action, by deeds, more than by institutional changes. Is that your conclusion?
Absolutely, by actions and by topics where we see that we cannot do it alone. We cannot move forward alone. There are so many things, and we have seen, there was this talk 2 years ago, globalization will now recede, it will be turned back, and this is the same narrative of also about the EU being on intensive care. No, that's not true. That's not true, not at all. We have actually done more, and we're more aligned now in terms of economic policy, also with other big, like the US. On economic policy, we're very aligned. So we're not going backwards. There is no going backwards. In the 21st century, there is only going forward.
And it's also about the narrative, in fact, and the way we talk about our own performance and our own progress. Thank you. Florina, you had the first word. You have the last word. What is your assessment of what is to come?
Well, we always hope for the best. So we want to see the results of the current transformation and transition the EU is going through. I wouldn't necessarily say that changing the treaty will fix everything. I think we have to use at maximum what we have already in the treaties. Remove, for example, all the barriers on the internal market, and then sit around the table and see what is next. Because what we see, and I think no one, or maybe I haven't heard it very well, no one mentioned the conference on the future of Europe. We just had this process that came to an end only a few days ago. And our citizens were very much asking for concrete results. So we have, in order to make EU attractive, to deliver results. So that's what I wish to see in the next couple of years. I wouldn't say in 15 years, but in the next couple of years, result-oriented EU, and an EU that will have as added value the long-term vision. Governments, their vision is bound by the electoral mandate. The EU has the luxury of planning long-term. So let's use this power and use it also in order to shape the policies at the level of the member states as entity of the EU.
Well, thank you very much, Florina. All the best to Bucharest. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining here on the panels, Sebastian and Atanas. Thank you everyone who was watching us and sending comments in front of the screens, and in particular here in the audience. I think that's a very good way to end this first session of our conference. Work on results, and that's actually what we do. And if the motto of the last Council Presidency of Romania was cohesion, a common value, and resilience, I think this is today is more important than ever. And we have to just jointly work on a Europe making it better every day, and that's what we're going to do. With this, I would like to tell everyone to stay tuned. We will be back in 10 minutes. There will be a second panel, rethinking about European integration, and it's a little bit of a follow-up to what we have just talked about. And in particular, it will be about the consequences of the Russian war against Ukraine, the consequences for European integration. Stay tuned. We see each other in 10 minutes. Thank you for joining, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Welcome back to our Europa Club Special here in Vienna in the House of the European Union in the First District. Good to see you all in front of the screens, and welcome to everyone again in the audience. We will be discussing in this second session about the 15 years of EU membership of Bulgaria and Romania. We have been taking stock, and we will be looking now a little bit more into the future. The title of the second panel is Rethinking European Integration, the Consequences of the Russian War against Ukraine for the European Union. Now, we are having an excellent panel, if I may say so, here for this session. And I'm looking for very much interaction, actually. And if you back home want to send your remarks, your questions, as always, please do so. And I try to look it up in my mobile phone. And if you go via the social media channels, and we will find your comments or questions. Now, first of all, to kick it off, let me introduce the panelists. I would like to start with Olga Pindyuk. Thank you for coming, Olga. Olga is an economist at the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies, and she's a country expert on Ukraine and has published many policy briefs and policy papers lately, in particular on the impact of European action after the 24th of February. Welcome, Olga. To my right-hand side, let me welcome Velina Chakarova. Welcome. Velina is director of the Institute for European and Security Policy, with a very special focus on system transformation and the geostrategy of global actors. Let me also welcome, in particular, our colleague from Romania, Mihai Razvan Ungureanu. Please excuse my French.
It's fine. You pronounce it well.
Thank you for joining us. Mihai has a very long political experience. Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, Senator, but he's also an academic. He teaches at the University of Bucharest and lectures at the Diplomatic Academy here in Vienna. A very warm welcome. Now, also a very warm welcome, in particular, to Wolfgang Petritsch. Wolfgang Petritsch, very well known, of course, in this country and beyond. Many time ambassador, high representative of the international community for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Today, president not only of the Marshall Fund Foundation, but also of the Austrian Institute for International Politics. Welcome, Wolfgang. Now, let me start the discussion with Olga, if I may. Olga, what is your assessment of the current situation? How do you see the consequences of the Russian aggression against Ukraine and the European action and the impact of the European action in particular? What is your, how would you, I mean, that's a big question, but what would be your first assessment of where we stand at the moment?
I mean, thank you very much for inviting me and having an opportunity to speak here. And yeah, thank you. It's a very fundamental question, and I will probably try to tackle it from different angles. First, we always, as economists, look at economic consequences, and I think it is always the fact that economic consequences later lead to some political transformations. So what we can see from the economic effects, which already have taken place, these are prices. This is the immediate effect for the European Union, how the inflation is developing. Ukraine, as probably everyone knows now, is a very important global exporter of many agricultural commodities. And the war has impacted very strongly negatively the exports of the country. There is also prices of fuel and this comes from a different mechanism. The European Union has understood the necessity to decrease its dependency on Russia in the light of the recent events, and finally, I might add, so the fuel prices have been also skyrocketing. This leads to strong negative economic effects in many countries, especially those which are the most exposed to Russia economically in terms of imports of fuel. And these are mostly the Eastern European Union members, Romania and Bulgaria included. So talking about economics, that's it, briefly in the short run. But if we are talking about more longer-term effects, it has become clear that the European Union policy in its eastern neighborhood hasn't been really sufficient to secure its geopolitical goals, to secure the economic, political security of the European Union. So they're basically offering such forms of integration as deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, association agreement, to Ukraine, also Georgia and Moldova. It has proven to be really not sufficient to make sure that such ties between the countries which are building up are not irreversible. So the Russian Federation has continued to see Ukraine as a sphere of its influence and hasn't really perceived these agreements that Ukraine concluded with the EU as sufficient deterrence enough to really reconsider its political strategy. And yeah, I think probably it would be really good to kind of shape the direction of the conversation somewhere, because it's a very broad question you posed. Maybe, yes. If
we start with a broad question and then we get more and more detailed as questions coming. What is your take? How do you view, I mean, we've talked about the geopolitical dimension, the geopolitical role that in particular now also Bulgaria and Romania play, and the Romanian port of Constantia. What I'd be interested in now is also, how do you view the action taken by the European Union? We've decided and are implementing 5 packages of sanctions. 6 packages is under discussion. From an economist point of view, how do you assess the leverage, the economic leverage, and the impact that this may have?
I mean, in general, it's a very positive for Ukraine and for the long-run political situation, the sanctions that have been taken. But I also would say that the sanctions have been taken always a little bit too late, you know, too little too late. That was the pattern. And it's not going to really change much in the short run. So the sanctions are designed in a way to really impact the biggest harm for the Russian economy in the longer run. So it will be important to keep the sanctions to make the Russian Federation less capable of financing similar wars in the future. But in terms of short-run outcomes of the war, it is rather financing availability for Ukraine and weapons support. This is the most crucial. And I think here we come back again to this issue of anonymity, the need of anonymity of decisions in the European Union, which was already raised in the first session. And we can see that, like, for example, Hungary is now blocking the oil sanctions, right? So this is something which illustrates how, in a way, that the European Union actions are not powerful enough, also for the reasons of the design of the political union. It would be important, like, to go full way and to fully embargo imports of Russian fuel, because Actually, last month, Russia had one of the highest on record revenues from exports of its fuel to the European Union, which is in a kind of, I mean, not surprising, but it should be really surprising that it's taken place like that. That basically that Russia is getting more revenues to finance its war in this. So it would be really like a wishful thinking, perhaps, but really desirable to have European Union move faster. Right? The European Union doesn't have this speed as the US or UK now have in terms of making their decision, in terms of having clear geopolitical strategy, which is shared by all the members of the Union. And this is one of the drawbacks, as we can see, for not only for you, for which decreases chances or makes it more harder for Ukraine to win the war, but also for the longer run. You know, what will be the geopolitical weight of the European Union in the global setup of things. So I think the war which is going on now, it actually brings to light, it clearly illustrates what are the biggest issues the European Union has in its setup, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mihai, over to you. How do you see the role of Romania as is it an anchor of stability, or how do you approach the particular unstable and uncertain situations in your neighborhood, also in Transnistria and in Moldavia? What needs to be done there? What is your take on this?
Thank you very much for your question, and thank you very much for your invitation. I'm happy to be here with so many friends. Some of them I couldn't have seen them for about 4 years now. And I'm glad to be next to Ambassador Petric, with whom I worked, and Ambassador Zellmeyer, to leaving ambassador who is there on the side, because he's my friend. The truth is that there are good news and bad news. The good news is that the European Union and NATO reacted, including the transatlantic partners, etc., they reacted swiftly when confronting the first days of the aggression. And for me, that was quite of a surprise. And it was a matter of creativity, of inventivity, making for the first time in the history of the European Union the sanction mechanism one of the most important pieces of the European Union's foreign policy mechanisms. That was absolutely outstanding. Making out of the instrument addressing raw military force that was adopted 1 year ago, if I'm not mistaken, one of the most important, again, one of the most important components of EU's response to Russia's invasion in Ukraine was, again, absolutely outstanding. Leaving the possibility to individual member countries to react by exporting military hardware, for example, or financial aid directed to military means and targets, was again something the European Council and at the level of the European Commission was well understood and acknowledged and helped at the same time. Just to put it into brackets, something that is for us common knowledge now is that what Putin could not imagine was that he brought back the US in Europe. He put a lifeline into the alliance, into NATO. Remember that some 10 years ago, everybody was asking, what is NATO about? And what's the life of NATO now, since there is no danger coming from the East? NATO exists, and thanking the enlargement policies of NATO, we now have almost a complete overlapping between the limits of the European Union and NATO's territory. And again, taking into account all these things that happened in the first 10 days, the first 2 weeks after the 24th of February, we can now
understand several other lessons that we could draw off the situation of today. The truth is that the involvement of NATO countries, US, UK included, and European Union, plus individual members of the European Union, was so swift, although mostly welcome, but so swift that it could take behind the decision no risk assessment situations, risk assessment reasonment behind the decision. So there are risks that we will have to face. And one of the most important risks or questions, if you want, that we'll have to deal with is, on one hand, what would happen with the security arrangements EU and NATO, or individual members of EU and NATO, were parts of prior to 2014, because that was the year when the OSCE went down, absolutely down, in the hell of politics. What would happen with Russia? What would happen with Ukraine, whose reconstruction is worth roughly 600 billion euros, if I'm not mistaken? And this is only to patch some wounds. It's not about maintaining Ukraine on the lifeline. And what would happen to all of us in terms of integration and enlargement? Coming back to the good news, the reaction, at least when it comes to these 5 million Ukrainian citizens that migrated from Ukraine into the European Union, that was absolutely fantastic. It proves that the European Union countries are at least integrated at the level of common values and common lines, common principles of ethic help. Second, that the European Union knows how to face such a humanitarian crisis, maybe not exactly in the immediate aftermath of happening, because it's still unfolding, but I cannot see any problems in the months to come. And third, it proved that the enlargement process, as it has been until now, although there are some countries lining up to the entrance of the European Union, was and is worthwhile. What went good is that those countries who succeeded to complete the expectations of Brussels and of the other member countries were worth taking into the family. And here comes the question. What happens at strategic level? What happens with Ukraine, who wants to get onto the fast track? What happens to Moldova, to the Republic of Moldova? What would happen with a further country, but nevertheless riparian to the Black Sea, which is Georgia? With Ukraine, we don't have an answer. And here comes to the question asked about the consensus mechanism. Sometimes the consensual mechanism is good, sometimes it's wrong. Let's not change it when problems such as Russia's aggression in Ukraine occur. We'll think about this later on in better times. But what would happen in Ukraine if accepted as a candidate country? Would it be Ukraine ever, in a matter of years, ready to undertake all challenges that would be put before the authorities in Kiev, authorities that might change in 4 years or 2 years, depending on the democratic processes of election? Would it be ready to take the challenges, face them, and resume a policy, an European policy, an European integrational path, no matter what internal policies are about? In Ukraine, we still do not know about this. Ukraine has expressed many times she wants to become a member of the European Union. Okay, as I said, there is a long queue, which starts with Turkey and ends up with other countries in the Western Balkans. How would we manage, how would we gauge between who's been ready and who's not yet? That is the first question. The second question was, I was asked about it several times. What would happen with Transnistria? The truth is that Transnistria is a living bomb. It's like a grenade. Once you pull out the pin, it explodes. Transnistria is in something like 63 to 65% inhabited by Russian-speaking citizens of the Republic of Moldova. Although Transnistria itself is a sort of a political tumor, it's a non-state, but it's problematic because it's been taken, and this is what Mr. Kozak said several times, who I think still is the negotiator of the Russian Federation for the Transnistrian status in Moscow and in Chisinau. He said it several times, the interests of the Russian community living in Transnistria ought to be defended by Moscow. And you have heard this. You have heard this when it comes to Lugansk, when it comes to Donbass in general, to Crimea. So it sounds like it's coming. The truth is that we don't have an answer to what would happen, and imagine this situation, which is not absurd at all, is being taken into account by several political experts. What would happen the moment when a company of tanks from Transnistria would cross the Dniester, the river which separates the mainland Moldova from Transnistria, would cross the Dniester and would head for Chisinau? What would happen then? What would be the attitude of the actual politicians in Chisinau? How would they try to imagine a survival solution? What would be that solution worth of? Most of, it's no need to tell you what the relations between Romania and the Republic of Moldova are about, the cultural, ethnic, historical identities, and so on and so forth. The truth is that, coming back to this, we do not have an answer. And this is a major strategic challenge. We don't have an answer neither in Bucharest nor in Brussels. We don't have an answer neither at the level of NATO, because this is again like an absurd but likely to happen escalation of the general war in Ukraine.
Would you have an answer to this? Or?
Well,
on a personal level?
A personal level, yes. I had that kind of answer. I would not dare utter in front of you. I mean, I'd better go in an empty room and talk to myself there. But it's, this reminds me of Yeats, the famous Irish poet, and there is a verse of him, and I think I can quote it correctly. The future has the flavor of the past. Now, the future has the flavor of the past. Romanians could interpret this in a certain way.
How would they interpret it? Can you help us?
I leave it to Romanians.
Okay, we can talk about that later on.
And it also applies to the situation in Russian Federation, because frankly speaking, since we are here in a family and celebrating Bulgaria's and Romania's accession to the European Union, we saw it coming. We saw it coming. But what we could not believe is that it would happen. That is incredible. But we saw it coming. It's like after drinking tons and tons of whiskey, you know that cirrhosis is coming, but you still don't believe it coming.
Okay, with that, I will thank you very much. We're not over yet, but please, there's always time for good applause. Velina, what do you see coming?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak after my Romanian colleague, because I am famous for being very cynical and quite pessimistic, because my specialty is geopolitics and global affairs.
That is a challenge now for you.
It never ends in a kind of a good mood, but I will try to do my best, because in fact I came today with some good news, which I really wanted to point to. First of all, if we look at the title of our session, Rethinking Enlargement, in light of Russia's war, because the war is not over, and I have a little bit the feeling that people are already having a kind of an attitude that we are beyond it. No, the war is not over, and the war will continue if we here within the European Union, together with our, of course, international partners, don't do anything possible, and I really want to highlight possible, to actually end this war. And we know how to do it. And this means, of course, all possible means, and of course, full-scale assistance to Ukraine. I mean, just to give you one example, I think Latvia already gave away 1/3 of its defense budget to Ukraine. So we are all together in this, and we have to sacrifice anything to make this war end. But a little bit more about it later. I argue that we should actually rephrase it. It's not about rethinking enlargement, because enlargement, I argue, has been the most ambitious and the most successful geo-economic policy of the European Union. And the very fact that Russia, in fact, started the full-scale war against Ukraine was also because of this successful story. I think this is something that is very often underestimated or neglected in the European member states. The whole Russian narrative about the so-called NATO expansion collapsed once Finland and Sweden officially decided to apply for membership. That means that in reality the Russian president was arguing, was using the false narrative, of course, mostly because of its own population. But basically, he not only did not prevent a NATO expansion, but in fact accelerated the NATO enlargement. So what was not being discussed is that he also wanted to prevent Ukraine's drifting away from Russia on European terms, because the whole modernization, the whole institutional building, the accession process, the integration into the deep and comprehensive free trade area with the European Union has been a successful story over the last more than 10 years when it comes to the relations of the European Union with Ukraine. And Ukraine was drifting away from Russia in such a speed in terms of political, economic, and also cultural terms. And this was one of the reasons I argue that the Russian president started this war, in order to prevent this from happening, because he saw, in fact, Ukraine as being part not just of this famous near abroad or sphere of influence, but of something much bigger, and that was his geopolitical bloc. And this is now the second successful story of the European Union. Now, the first one, the European Union did not have to wage wars. It was the power it was the normative power, it was the soft power that countries wanted to join this bloc, and not just because of the common market, as we heard from the first session. But the second proof that this was a successful and is still successful story is the fact that the Russian president basically copy-pasted the whole project and initiated something called Eurasian Economic Union. Now, I've studied the Eurasian Economic Union. I can assure you that all the integration phases, one by one, from the European Union were basically copy-pasted, and something as an integration bloc, of course, without the soft power, obviously, was launched in Central Asia. Why? Because it's successful. So he was basically convinced also of the fact that a regional power would need also a successful integration model. And given the fact, and this is my third argument, that we are right now in a transitionary period of the global affairs, things are so fluid geopolitically and geoeconomically seen, it's a good news to be part of a bigger integrational bloc. It's good news.
this is one way how you can actually survive the transitionary waters, which are very insecure. We don't know whether we will be going towards a bifurcation of the world, given the systemic rivalry between United States and China, or would it be a multipolarity? But obviously, one of these geoeconomic actors globally is still the European Union, on par with China and the United States. Now, going back to rethinking membership, I would argue we should not rethink, we should intensify, we should speed up the process, because on the one side we have a geopolitical vacuum in the Western Balkans, and on the other side now we have also a geopolitical vacuum in Eastern Europe. So speeding up the process means that we have a successful story to tell, and we should actually capitalize on this. We should not allow other geopolitical actors, and we have plenty of them in our direct neighborhood, to actually fill the gaps like they did in Afghanistan. This is our direct neighborhood. We should not allow it. So it's in our common geopolitical interest. I'm talking now, of course, about the systemic level. I'm not talking about the interests of one or another member state. It is our collective geopolitical interest to speed up the process and to close this gap in the Western Balkans, and also in Eastern Europe when it comes to Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. And I can assure you that the very fact that now Russia officially announced that obviously European Union membership is also not on the agenda, that says a lot. And they certainly have read finally our Treaty of the European Union, where we also have the Article 42, paragraph 7, which also points to the clause of mutual support in terms of a member being attacked. So, given the fact that they are also against NATO membership. So, to sum it up, we should be on the same page. We should overcome this kind of minor transitional member states' interests in the light of the big transformative processes that are taking place. Otherwise, I argue that if we do not overcome it now, we may turn into something I call geopolitical backyard of the international relations. Why? Because the whole world will move on. There will be other projects, integrational projects. We have now China with its own regional integration projects in Asia and beyond. We have United States, and in a sense, we are a shrinking power in terms of demographics and in terms of course, geoeconomic cloud. So we need to do it now. This is our homework.
Thank you. Mihai, you wanted to jump in?
Just very, very briefly, because what my friend said was absolutely was clear enough, and it's a joke. What I want to tell you, I was surprised to see Sweden. I was not surprised to see Sweden joining the North Atlantic Alliance, because Sweden means almost 30% of the overall European armament production. They are integrated in the defense industries of Europe. So for Sweden is easy. And which are the neighbors of Sweden? On one hand, Norway, member of NATO. On the other hand, some water. So it's easy for them. But for the Finns, they will have, when members of NATO, the longest border with the Russian Federation, which brings us, basically, historically speaking, into the situation of 1939-1940, Soviet-Finnish war. Now, and here is the joke. Putin has been designed to be awarded the 2022 yearly prize for best NATO recruiter ever. That was the joke. And since Martin told us about a psychoanalytical play with Sigmund Freud's Park here and so on and so forth, and coming back to your words, when Putin shows his vulnerable to hard power, which is NATO, but also to the soft power of the European Union, well, it speaks a lot about Putin's own problems, about his miscalculations on one hand, about his narratives, his ways of interpreting Europe and the alliance. And this plays again himself on a psychoanalytical basis. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wolfgang, over to you. Over to you. What are the lessons we are learning from what we see now, and what is it that we have to rethink, and how can we change to reap the benefits of this difficult situation?
Well, I believe that there is the war now against the Ukraine has actually demonstrated that the European Union now is confronted, and this is yet another turning point, with the question of where does the European Union, Europe, so to speak, end in the East. We know that in the southeast we have Turkey, and we know the endless story about integrating Turkey into the European Union. It obviously was, so far at least, a big failure and will remain so. Although geopolitically, Turkey is probably much more important than Ukraine when it comes to the geopolitical situation and the security for Europe. However, what I'm afraid of is that we will repeat in Ukraine the Turkey scenario, that we will see now in the heat and the fog of the war actually promises that a European Union, as it is constructed now, simply cannot fulfill. And I think we need to really be very careful when we talk about this illusionary new European situation that we are in. Yes, we are in a situation where the European project is definitely on the defensive. Obviously, the peace project has not worked in the way we would have liked to see it to work. Yes, inside it did work to a certain degree, to a large degree, I should say. But then the European Union as a strategic and geostrategic actor, we see the limits. Now, what does it mean? For me, it means basically that we need to rethink the whole enlargement process, as was already mentioned here, in a way which needs to depart from what we have done so far. And there we need to then, of course, differentiate between the consolidation enlargement, which the Western Balkans is, which is not really an enlargement, which is actually more in the interest of the European Union to geographically and in many other ways, of course, economically, politically, consolidate. However, the real challenge, of course, when it comes to enlargement, is clearly what was addressed here, and that is Ukraine, Georgia, and I think you have really pointed out a very important sticking point and highly sensitive issue. This is Moldova and Transnistria. I think that is more sensitive and more complicated, actually, than this kind of outright war which is taking place now with Ukraine. Again, thinking from a European viewpoint. So of course, we know that European Union, this is actually a historic experience, always needs a crisis inside the European Union or outside in order to make progress. However, I think we have all already met the difficulties and challenges in terms of enlargement when it comes to the Western Balkans. And in the case of Ukraine, this kind of, in my opinion, almost naive offer, you belong to the European Union. Of course, we'll say to the European family, but basically it is the European Union, and that was taken up by Mr. Zelensky and the Ukrainians. And one thing is clear, I mean, the war has accelerated the nation building in Ukraine itself. We don't know the eventual borders of Ukraine, but we know that Ukraine is a distinct nation, and a nation which is not divided along language barriers. It is united almost on its way to become a civic state. And I think this is one of the greatest contributions that the European Union needs, because this is the very essence of the European Union. I mean, we're talking about Romania and Bulgaria. I think the problem really, what I see in the conflict between North Macedonia and Bulgaria is not so much let me say, a material or political problem. It is really, it goes into the core of identity politics. And it is actually a huge problem, a much larger problem than we think, because the wars in former Yugoslavia started exactly at this point. Yeah? And I distinctly remember when Mr. Karadzic said, Bosnia-Herzegovina doesn't exist. This is not a state. And of course, it rings like Putin. Yeah? And Putin has said, what we have heard from Sofia, actually Ukrainian is not a language, it's a dialect. Yeah? And I think we in the European Union have to take this far more as a principle, as something which we need to really be extremely careful. And I'm coming to the close, because any enlargement would challenge the issue of liberal democracy unless you come to terms inside the European Union, in Bulgaria, for example, or in Hungary, or you would, if taking in the Western Balkans already, which strand would you strengthen? The Copenhagen strand, so to speak, liberal democracy, or the authoritarian strength? Why is Mr. Orban so interested in getting Serbia into the European Union? And I'm also one that fully supports the integration. But I think we need to sort out this highly decisive issue. Will the consolidation in the Western Balkans strengthen the idea of a European Union as we obviously all agree here in this room, not necessarily in the wider public, or will it weaken? Because if this is not a strengthening, then to think of how to include Ukraine or Georgia into the European Union, and here I'm again thinking in terms of that we also need to open up the question and the issue of a staged accession, and we also need to open up, maybe even reopen, the issue of different speeds to join the European Union. We already have it when we think of the Euro, of the Schengen, and so on, so this is nothing new, but it will take on a far greater relevance, an existential relevance for the future of the European Union.
Wolfgang, a follow-up question to you. You have just said that we shouldn't promise what we cannot keep. We have to rethink the enlargement process, stage enlargement. merit-based enlargement, and then there's this geopolitical dimension which is actually gaining ground. We have to rethink the whole process of neighborhood and enlargement policy. You've asked the question that I would like you to answer, which is, where does European integration end for you? What is your personal view of what should be offered now, of how this new neighborhood and enlargement policy should look like?
I think what we need to do right now is really to prepare all these aspiring countries for being part of this, let me again call it this European family, European Union, which is still very much to be defined. Yeah? I think we are also now at a stage where we can say the European Union, as we see it as the member states, is probably something which will have to rethought, as I said before. So therefore, I believe that we need to now do in the short term whatever we can do, from supporting Ukraine, of course, from going on to rethink the accession process, the original accession process in the Western Balkans. I think this will be the litmus test of the next step of enlargement. If we do not manage the Western Balkans, then, of course, I don't see a perspective for other countries like Ukraine joining. So therefore, in the short run, to revitalize, to revisit the methods and the way that this accession process is being handled. I would even go a step deeper into it and say, we all, and this is something that the European Union needs to do when you think of the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. I mean, there are 5 non-recognizers in the European Union. They should better get their act together and contribute to a solidified European position. How can we ask Mr. Vučić to recognize Kosovo if there are 5 states in the European Union who are not recognizing it? So that is something. And the second point of contention, if you want, is of course Bosnia-Herzegovina. Bosnia-Herzegovina in many ways is a mini Yugoslavia, and we know what the difficulties and problems at the time were there. So we need to pay special attention to it. And unfortunately, the instruments, the tools that were used over the past quarter of a century already, that we are present there with the Office of the High Representative, which I ran exactly, by the way, 20 years ago that I left my job there, where I thought, and when I handed over to Paddy Ashton, I said, you have to be the last High Representative, and which meant at the time, the time horizon for joining the European Union for Bosnia was 2014, 100 years after Sarajevo, so to speak. Where are we now? So this, if we do not manage this kind of laboratory for the European Union and in the interest of the functionality of the European Union, I don't see actually a realistic chance to follow through with our promise to the Ukraine. And again, I should say, I really want to avoid a Turkey scenario in the case of Ukraine.
Let us open... yes, please, and then we open to the audience. I was sure you wanted to intervene.
I think it's important to add something. First, the only neighborhood that has been described and defined as European, as we know, and that's why I want to clarify it for those who don't know, is in fact Eastern Europe, where we have 6 countries. Ukraine, Moldova, and Belarus, and then Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. These are the countries that are eligible to apply. Basically, they don't have a perspective, which is why in future, if they receive a perspective, they are eligible to apply. This is very important. It has been defined already. There is no dispute about it. So First thing to do is to finally offer a membership perspective. Second, the European Union, in fact, has already treated these countries as being members in many ways. Think about the support during the pandemic for vaccines. There has been financial support, financial assistance. I mean, everyone else was selling. Russia, China. The same goes for Western Balkans. What the European Union needs to do is to reach out to the citizens, also often bypassing the governments. Governments are, doing what they always will do, maximizing power, trying to survive political struggle. But in fact, if we improve, if the European Union improves the strategic communication on the ground, because still a lot of citizens are in fact pro-European, even in those countries that have pro-Russian orientation, there are actually voices. So in a sense, what I'm trying to say also is that the European Union, and I think there are already successful formulas, can also be more direct. I mean, going also to the municipalities and to the citizens and doing projects with them in a more direct manner. Visa liberalization, as I said, free trade, deepened comprehensive free trade agreement. There's so many things that have been achieved, unfortunately, because it's a very technical process, the very same way how the enlargement is a very technical process. Nobody cares. Everyone wants to, see the outcome. And the outcome is something that is taken for granted, more or less. Everybody from my generation has already forgotten what it means to wait for a visa or to have all these tariffs and whatsoever when Bulgaria was not a member. So in a sense, a lot has been already achieved, even though they are not member states, both in Western Balkans and in Eastern Europe. And we should really speed up the process. This was my main narrative, not going back into institutional rethinking and going back into, endless dialogues about what hasn't worked, what has worked, and so on. So just walking the walk. This is what I'm really argue.
Yes, please.
So talking about readiness, I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Ukraine is often compared with Poland, and Poland is a success story. But the main difference is that Poland was offered a credible commitment of becoming the European Union member, and investment flew in. So, and then there is a synergy between having enough capital for investment, for economic transformation, institutional development follows. So I think if Ukraine is offered a credible chance of membership, probably that would speed up its transformation. And another thing which I also want to point out is that in terms of institutional development, Ukraine is actually not really lagging behind the Western Balkans. It's actually outperforming it, many countries, and in terms of democratic institutions, in terms of civil society participation, it's performing better than some of the Central Eastern European Union members.
Thank you. So the transformative power, actually, of the enlargement process is really, really important. Can I now open? Yes, the last one, and then I open to the audience. Okay. And no compromises here anymore. Go ahead, Wolfgang.
Just because Olga spoke now as a member of the Vienna Institute for Economics, there's an excellent study out there that you put out. I guess you also collaborated on this, and about the Western Balkans integration, economic integration, yeah? And of course, it tells you a story which is rather sobering, yeah? I think we need to really be very careful now when we talk about the facts and figures and try to put the facts and figures as a basis for a policy, yeah? And that is something which I believe we need to keep in mind. And of course, there's now this euphoria that we are actually united against Russia or against the aggression, and I'm fully for it. But we must not forget that actually the long road to integration for these countries, more than 20 years now, it's exactly, Salonika was in 2003, should give us something to think about.
Yes, okay. So we have something in common here. We have to carefully speed up the process. I think that's where we can meet. Okay, let's move to the audience. Who would like to ask a question or comment on something? Please.
My name is Günther Fellinger. I'm the initiator of the Austrian People's Petition to join NATO. And the reason why I do this is because we need more unity in Europe. My question is concretely to Bulgaria and Romania. Would you support Austria joining NATO? Would you think it will be useful? And secondly, because now until the 1st of July 2013, we were actually fine in Europe. Yeah? We were just enlarging, and the normal thing was to have Croatia in the European Union, in NATO, and also now it's in Euro and in the Schengen zone. It's already decided. My question is, how do you feel in Romania and Bulgaria that you are not in the Eurozone and not in Schengen, and there's no decision for that? And don't you think that it would be extremely helpful for our enlargement debate if you would join the Eurozone and Schengen and be fully, and also recognize Kosovo, by the way, and to be fully then in the West, in the EU, and then it would be a good role model for Moldova and for Ukraine and for Georgia also to follow this process.
Thank you very much. Is there another question from the audience? Yes, please. Just saying that, you know, NATO membership is at this point in time not very popular in Austria, but you know that.
Thank you. I'm a student of political science and happy to be here. But I was wondering if you could tell me what are your views, all of you, if somebody is interested in answering, of European Union steps taking towards the Western Balkans accession process, and maybe taking into consideration that Croatia has been is a member state, and what was the difference between ex-Yugoslav countries and Croatia's accession process? So why was Croatia has become a member state and not the others? I mean, we all know some reasons, but what does the European Union do actually for these countries to contribute more? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a third? Please, next to the lady, yes.
Hello, I'm happy to speak here, and I want to have a look in the future. At the moment, Russia is mostly seen as an opponent, but when President Putin should resign at some time, and a more liberal president is working in this country, would it also be imaginable that we work more with Russia and less against it, and even to let Russia be part of the European Union?
Okay. There was another hand raised. Yes, please. We collect some questions.
So I have actually a question about what are we going to do with the members of the European Union who have, I don't remember the word, like legaturi, connections with Russia, because as we know, Austria has a lot of links with Russia. We know that the one of the ex-ministers invited Putin to her wedding, and we know about the Ibiza affair, and we also know about the fact that Nehammer went to Kiev, and then the next day he went to Moscow with the doors closed, and we don't know what they discussed there. So what are we going to do with these countries who are in the European Union, who still are linked to Russia? We don't do anything about them. So this is my question.
Yes, that's a very good question. Thank you very much. Mihai, let me ask the Romanian diplomat to take the floor first.
Yes, it is a very good question. I could have never imagined that I need to recall what was the Ibiza scandal about after seeing Mr. Strache some weeks ago or 10 days ago trying to redo his story in an interview. Well, coming back to the questions and trying to answer them one by one, and hopefully I can recall them all.
I will help you, don't worry.
Thank you, very kind of you. First, about Austria's possibility/opportunity to join the alliance. I know it's not popular, but I also congratulate you for signing the open letter. I've seen there lots of names, and I was surprised. I came across the letter, and I would suppose that everybody knows around what it is about. Yeah, I came across the letter the day after I heard my very good friend, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Austria, Ursula Plasnik, speaking in Salzburg.
Mihai, just let me add for the audience, this is a letter which is signed by 50 academics or diplomats, politicians in the public. You also signed it, 50 plus. It is not only about whether joining NATO or not, it's about asking and pushing for discussion,
debate,
for public debate on the consequences for a neutral Austria. Where shall it move, I think?
Thank you very much. It is about a debate, and it is about a debate with a sight towards a possible political decision. Because what lays behind the words of the letter is the so-called common vision, Austrian common vision, quote unquote, which is something, in my opinion, utterly false. That Austria thinks about herself defended by a ring of neighboring countries which are members of NATO. So therefore, why should Austria join NATO? Inasmuch it is defended by this so-called NATO wall. The truth is that a debate is necessary. The truth is that after Ursula Plasnik's discourse, after the letter, after some other, I've seen 3 days ago a broadcast in ZIB, yeah, in Zeitenbild, about this. It lasted 30 minutes, and the comments on the social media were in thousands. Needless to say that most, I would say 80% of them were completely negative, went into added injury to insult. But this comes back to a certain lack of debate. The problem is that when it comes to a strategic decision of the kind, yeah, after Sweden, Finland, the rapprochement of the Swiss Federation to NATO, wouldn't be timely not to retake into discussion the contents of the 1955 treaty? It's not about this, but it is about stirring up a discussion. And this is against, I must say, I'm sorry to my Austrian friends, it goes somehow against a populist kind of behavior, of political behavior, according to which it's better to shut up when it comes to difficult problems instead of debating them. And this is a wrong approach from my point of view. Now, this is the first. It is a subject that interests me. Second, Eurozone. I don't know whether Romania is prepared for the Eurozone now. I mean, this is a question one should address to the government in Bucharest. I cannot see people hurrying up to joining the Eurozone for economic reasons, at least in this moment. And I doubt there is a negative popular perception against joining the Eurozone. When it comes to the Schengen, that's very much a political cum popular frustration. And the truth is that to bang at the doors of the European Commission to join the Schengen area for almost 15 years now, it's a bit shameful. It's a bit shameful because there are no reasons except some political criticisms coming from some older members of the European Union addressing this issue. Whereas from a technical point of view, Romania is fully prepared to join the group. Leaving aside the fact that Romania is a border country of the European Union, when you take into account what happens at this border, which is one of the hottest border, Poland's border included, Baltic states' borders included, but it's one of the hottest. I mean, there is a difference between the membership of Portugal and the membership and the presumptive membership of Romania in the Schengen area. And you would certainly admit it. Now, so far about those two issues. I want to come back to what Ambassador Petric said, because he was very explicit, and I fully agree with him about not the contents, but the Auftakt of the enlargement process. Auftakt in the very musical sense of meaning of the word. There is a book that came out, and you're thinking if is absolutely coincidental to what I'm going to say. There's a book of dialogues between Francis Fukuyama and a lady from Norway, an academic from Norway. Came out last year, so it was just before the cracking of the war. And Fukuyama says something which perfectly rhymes with what you said, Ambassador Petric, and it comes from your experience as well. Liberal democracies should not be taken into account or categorized as such only on the basis of figures and facts, economic proficiency, and so on and so forth. It is not only about this. It is about some values which are deeply embedded into the mentality, the collective mentality of that nation, because nations, we have to imagine ourselves living with nations from now on. And what happens in Ukraine, which undergoes a nation-building process, is, in fact, the proof that we should abide ourselves with the idea that nations would outlive us. First, second, but how would this happen? Because one of the most important, says Fukuyama, one of the most important issues that we have to take into consideration when referring to the existence of nations is not just individual rights. It's about collective rights as well. And it's about the politics of identity. It's about how to make discrimination at internal level, at domestic level, fade out through politics of identity. And he says, and his judgment is, again, is fully overlapping yours, Ambassador. He says politics of identity should have one goal. It is a magic spell. They should build trust. Because when trust does not exist and does not function in a society, no matter how democratic it is, and no matter how liberal it pretends to be, then trust between individuals, trust between communities, trust between collectivities, then nothing can happen.
Thank you, Mihai. I think Wolfgang wants to come into the discussion, please.
Well, since I'm not the only Austrian here, since I'm not the only Austrian here, but one of those former officials, of course, I would like to comment on the issue of neutrality and our seemingly special relationship with Moscow.
Who said that there was no debate on neutrality? There is now, please.
Exactly. Now, first, thank you, Mihai. I'm fully in line with you, and of course, although I don't agree always with Francis Fukuyama, but his writings about identity are very interesting. Although the identity discussions or discourse is very different in Europe, because we are the inventors of the nation state, than they are in the United States, for example. But still, this is a very important issue, underestimated, because it has this kind of emotional dimension, which is so difficult to quantify and to give it a political. How should I say, political meaning, because it's all, there's a lot of positive things in there. As Benedict Anderson has said, nations are imagined communities, and imagination is much stronger than facts, as we know. We see this also now in the war, in the current war. Now, I want to come to these two issues. Why actually is Austria, in fact, so sympathetic to Russia? There is an important historic reason for this. Austria in 1945, Vienna, where we're now, was liberated by Russians and Ukrainians, by the way, as the Soviet army. Yeah? And they not only liberated us, they left us also in 1955. Without Moscow's decision to kind of force us into this neutrality, which we then later on adopted as our identity. I will talk about this later. We would have had to wait till 1989 to at least to reunite the eastern part of Austria with this is a reason. Does not in any case, of course, justify the deeds on the policies of Moscow in other parts of Europe. Yeah? But just to give you a bit of a feeling. Now, and clearly it was also against the backdrop of the neoliberal thinking that actually Handel would produce change. Trade and economic, that is basically what any neoliberal, good faith neoliberal would think. Yeah? The same in Germany, of course, where it's so much criticized now. There's so much more mea culpa than in Austria, because we always think we're kind of so small and we're always victims somehow. So therefore, it's not necessary to be so self-critical. Yeah, which is just an Austrian trait. We are the way we are now. To come to the issue of to continue and to close the issue with Moscow, I mean, at the time I wasn't in Austria in 2014 after the Crimea. I was in Harvard teaching at the Kennedy School. There was big discussions, and I was actually one of those who tried to also historically explain what has happened there, because it was not really clear to many American students what was happening there. But when I came back and saw now on television the rerun of how Putin was received in Vienna, I was shocked, actually. And I should add that at the time, at least intellectuals could have already known that this is actually the turning point. 2014 is much more of a turning point in the whole Russia-European issue. But that was obviously not the case to see this in this way. One of the few who did it and wrote a wonderful book about this is a German historian, a book about Ukraine, and some of the lines that he wrote in 2016, then when that was published in Fischer, actually could be quoted now. They sound as now is common knowledge and a common opinion. So this is it.
Wolfgang,
I'm too far now already.
We have 2 minutes left for the whole panel.
I will go now into...
Well, whatever you want to talk about, but just not more than 30 seconds.
Neutrality?
Neutrality.
Neutrality, again, is something which we will not discuss now, but it is...
That's the Austrian approach, you see? But it will be discussed.
Because I think neutrality as an expression is rather fluffy, flurry, something. It's about the policy. It's about what you do with this status. And unfortunately, over the 10, 15 years, nothing has happened. There was no neutrality policy. That's one point. But there used to be some back. Of course, I always have to refer to my former boss, Bruno Kreisky, where I was intimately involved in this. That was a highly controversial, but a very explicit policy of neutrality. Okay, now let me stop here.
Yes, please.
And just add some, no, add nothing. Let me stop here.
I'm so grateful.
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
1 second.
1 second. Okay, because we are celebrating 15 years, quite a lot of time, since the since signatures on the accession treaty were laid down. I'm one of the last remnants of those who did this. I would like to recall to our attention and to our Bulgarian friends the fact that they had a Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time, who was a dear friend of mine and with whom I worked a lot for Romania's and Bulgaria's accession to the European Union. So I take this opportunity, I'm sorry, but I take this opportunity to praise Mr. Ivailo Kalfin again. Thank you.
Nothing to be sorry about. Thank you for this. Please.
Okay, I think that we slided away from the main topic, which is, I mean, I have signed the letter and I'm deeply involved in actually trying to instigate a kind of a debate on the future of security policy here in this country and, of course, the relevance for Europe. So, obviously, I'm not interested in doing this right now because this is not the matter of this discussion. And I co-signed to my Romanian colleague when it comes to Bulgaria. Also, my other Bulgarian colleague already covered this exclusively. But there were some very good questions I'm so delighted to see young people. It's so good to see young people asking questions. And if you look at the polls, no matter in which member state, even in Western Balkan countries, young people are interested in the European Union and young people are interested in foreign security and defense policy. And these are, I really want today to focus on good news. So I'm doing my best.
Perfect.
The question, so I'm going to answer the questions coming from the young audience. The question about Slovenia, Croatia. I mean, yes, they were closer to the European Union, and of course they benefited from that, which is why also the process, the integration, the enlargement process was, working in a better way and was speeded up. And this is the result, this is the outcome of it. Now, when it comes to the rest of the Western Balkan countries, who is the largest investor? By far, the European Union, in all of them. But if you go to the countries and ask the citizens, they will tell you Russia, China, the Gulf states, Mars, Venus, but not the European Union, because the European Union is an institutional actor, and the European Union is a sum of its institutions, member states, and citizens. And I argue that...
Even more than that sometimes.
Pardon?
Even more than that sometimes.
Even more than that. Yeah, we have also metaphysical level of this discussion, but we are not going to do that right now. So what I'm trying to say is that it's what we all, as a strategic triad of institutions, member states with their governments, and citizens make out of it. So in a sense, of course, which is why I said previously, the European Union needs to learn strategic communication. It needs to do, positive messaging, which is why citizens will know better. And speaking of which, a proposal just put transparently all the investments and all the funding that the European Union has provided to these countries. Just do an app and provide this information for free for all citizens. Let's see how this will actually be perceived. I argue this will be a huge breakthrough. And going to the other question about the Russian tactics...
Elena, can we leave the other question to Olga, maybe?
Yeah, but I really want to say something, because I've been dealing with these questions for quite some time now, so it's going to be very short, and
yes,
Olga has,
perfect,
of course...
Perfect.
And also the gentlemen, to be honest, have...
it's okay.
Had their chance.
Go ahead.
The question about the Russian tentacles, very important one. It's not an Austrian. Unfortunately, Austria is quite of a front runner when it comes to Russian influence, but there are many others. So once again, proposal: former chancellors, ministers, important public figures have to make public and transparent if they work for countries like Russia or China or countries that we do not consider to be like-minded countries or to be part of our most important strategic partners in the future. Very easy way to do so. We cannot otherwise solve this issue. The question about Russia, the European Union, trust me, I've covered this for almost 20 years now. The European Union and the member states did anything possible to incorporate Russia in a myriad of policies. In fact, In fact, before the Eastern Partnership, which was launched in 2009, it was Russia's first policy being pursued by the European Union and by most of the member states, I would say most of the member states, when it comes to the relations with Eastern Europe. So Ukraine, or the whole region, was a function of the European Union-Russia relations. And they tried, because they did their best, because they were convinced that this is a way to pacify Russia. So they did it in various fields. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to be very realistic about it right now. I don't think that the Russian president is preparing for an exit or withdrawal. Okay, I mean, last year his intention was to rule for another 14 years. Another 14 years, he's really, having a competition with Xi Jinping on that matter. But we have to be very realistic about the fact there was this famous motto, security and European security and European policy with or basically without Russia. This was the leitmotif. Now we have to be realistic about the fact that we need to recreate a European security order despite Russia's existence in this very same space, in the sense of its geopolitical and its geoeconomic ambitions. And I think that was quite quick.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Olga, you had the first words, you have the last words. How do you see the future of EU-Russian relations?
I do second what Velina was saying about
if and
Russia.
when Vladimir Putin resigns.
But I just wanted to say, so the issues we are facing now, they have it's historical, deeply rooted history of treating Russia as the main agent. Ukraine and many other former Soviet republics, they were, as Velina just rightly said, so not really considered subjects or agents in the process. And hence this appeasement process and belief that economic cooperation would really help out here, which as an economist I should say that no, it's really, there are limits of how much economic ties can solve. So, and Russia, it's not about Putin. All right, it's the structure of the economy now. It's the authoritarian regime. It has accumulated and will accumulate trends from the natural resources. So it's not likely to change much with the Putin exit. And just something which was kind of resonating a bit, talking about nation building in Ukraine. I think this is one of the things which shows how far away from the European Union interest Ukraine was, because the nation building has started there centuries ago, right? So it's not really that it's happening now. And Russia, its intention, its actions, they were predictable even long before 2008. There were other wars Russia was staging, take Georgia, annexation of parts of Georgia, Transnistria, as Russia created things, Syrian war, Chechnya wars. So the problem is that there's quite a short number of analysts who are really experts on Ukraine. And I think that's the main reason why at the beginning of the war, Ukraine was, but the vast majority of the analysts was given zero chances of surviving 2 weeks of the war, right? Ukraine is not understood. Russia was seen as the main agent. And there are still now talks of appeasement, like, okay, let's just give up a bit of Ukraine's territory, who cares? But the thing is that having business as usual would just lead to further escalation of the situation we have now. It will be not Ukraine, it might be, I don't know, Latvia next time, who knows what. So it needs to be really clear now that the approach to this should change. There is no other way. And I think it's a hope that what we are having now is a wake-up call for the EU.
Yes, thank you very much. Can I thank all the audience in front of the screens, but also, of course, here in the House of the European Union in Vienna for your interest, your attention, your questions and comments. And in particular, warm thank you for the panel. Olga, Wolfgang, Velina, Mihai, thank you for joining us. And I promise you the debate on neutrality will take place. With these words, I would like to give the concluding remarks now to Albina Ketova. She's chargée d'affaires from the Embassy of the Republic of Bulgaria and Austria. Please, you have the floor.
Ich hatte schon die Angst, wenn diese Diskussion noch dauert, werden wir die 16 Jahre Mitgliedschaft fahren und nicht 15 Jahre. Aber danke schön, Herr Paul, dass alles in seinen Händen gemacht hat. So. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, erlauben Sie mir auf Deutsch meine kurze Rede zu machen. Lieber Martin, lieber Emil, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, Exzellenzen. 15 Jahre in der Europäischen Union. Historisch gesehen, das ist nicht so große Zeit, nicht so große Zeitfenster. Für uns aber eine spannende Zeit. Ich habe mir gefragt im Zusammenhang mit dieser Veranstaltung, was werde ich zum Beispiel den nächsten Generationen als Zeitgenosse erzählen? Und das Einzige, was ich sagen kann, das ist die Erinnerung für etwas Großartiges. Das war etwas Seltsames, eine seltsame Erfahrung für unsere beiden Länder, Bulgarien und Rumänien, nach dem Sozialismus gerade in die liberale Demokratie durchzufahren. Das war wirklich etwas, was nur unsere Länder erzählen können. Die Stimmung, die positive Stimmung der Leute, der Menschen könnte man auch in den Augen sehen und auf den Straßen beobachten und fühlen. Das ist etwas, was einmalig in der Geschichte geschieht. Und meine Erklärung, warum so das war, ist ganz einfach. Die Tagesordnung der Gesellschaft, der Tagesordnung der Bevölkerung und den politischen Eliten und Parteien war fast gleich. Wir waren so zum Europa, zum gelobten Land gestrebt und begeistert. Das ist die einzige Erklärung, was ich geben kann. Und in diesem Sinne, was ich in dem ersten Panel als Diskussion gehört habe, also es ist etwas ganz Gemeinsames, was ich als Zusammenfassung machen kann. Also gemeinsam, aber mit Herzen, nicht nur mit Geld und Macht. Das ist vielleicht die Erklärung. Ohne Herzen, ohne Glauben, ohne Vertrauen zwischen uns, wir können nicht weiter die europäische Integration durchführen. Es ist unmöglich. Das ist natürlich sehr schwierig. Ohne Populismus mache ich diese Bemerkung. Es handelt sich nicht hier um Populismus, sondern um irgendeine Art von Annäherung zwischen den politischen Eliten und Bevölkerung. Und das ist natürlich Aufgabe der politischen Eliten. Es ist sehr schwierig. Kein Wort dafür. Ein paar Worte möchte ich nur sagen für Schengener Raum. Also das ist eine kleine oder größere Enttäuschung in der Bevölkerung Bulgariens. Die technischen Kriterien wie Rumänien und auch Bulgarien sind 100% erfüllt. Wir warten auf die politische Entscheidung und hoffen, dass nicht weitere 15 Jahre das dauert, aber so bald wie möglich. Ein paar Worte möchte ich auch für Nordmazedonien sagen, weil eine Ex-Botschafterin hat hier das Wort genommen. Wissen Sie, Bulgarien ist nicht gegen Nordmazedonien und nicht gegen die Erweiterung. Das will ich sehr klar sagen. Ganz im Gegenteil. 30 Jahre, nicht 15, sondern 30 Jahre hat Bulgarien nicht nur Mazedonien in ihren Weg nach Europa unterstützt, aber wir haben alles gemacht. Wir haben kein einziges anti-mazedonisches Wort gesagt. Auch während unseres Integrationsprozesses, wenn Sie sich gut erinnern, ich habe das auch während einer Homes-Meeting gesagt, wann haben Sie von Bulgarien zum Beispiel ein anti-rumänisches Wort gesagt oder anti-österreichisches oder anti-griechisches oder whatever, wie man auf Englisch sagt. Das, was hier das Problem ist, dass aus bulgarischem Sichtpunkt der Ball ist in den Händen unserer nordmazedonischen Nachbarn. Wir haben 2017 ein Übereinkommen unterzeichnet für Freundschaft und für gute Nachbarschaft. Nordmazedonien muss die Pflichten, die in dieser Übereinkommen geschrieben sind, ganz einfach erfüllen. Das ist das Problem. Und wenn also wir jetzt unsere Augen schließen, was wird dann sein? Also wir werden sagen, ja, bitteschön, sprechen Sie immer anti-bulgarisch und wir zufrieden damit. Nein, wir sind nicht zufrieden damit. Kein Land würde zufrieden damit. Und unser Zeichen ist, ja, wir brauchen diese Erweiterung. Ein Vakuum in dem Herzen Europa braucht niemand. Aber unsere Nachbarn sollen verstehen, dass die europäische Integration und die Mitgliedschaft in der EU, das ist ein Prozess des Wachstums in der Gesellschaft, in der Politik und vielleicht sollen Sie irgendwelche Schritte vornehmen, aber bitte sagen Sie nicht, dass Bulgarien Schuld hat. Bulgarien braucht Solidarität von den anderen EU-Mitgliedstaaten und meiner persönlichen Meinung nach, wenn ein Druck geübt sein sollte, das ist nicht auf Bulgarien, bitteschön. Wir haben alles erfüllt, wirklich. Und das sind nicht nur Worte, das sind die Fakten aus den letzten 30 Jahren, wiederhole ich. Bulgarien war der erste Staat, der Mazedonien anerkannt hat. So, das war für Nordmazedonien. Sonst kehre ich mich zurück zu unserem Jubiläum, kleines Jubiläum. Ich denke vielen. Ich danke herzlich Herrn Martin Selmayr und seine Equipe für diese Veranstaltung. Ich hoffe, dass auch für das Publikum interessant war. Vielen Dank für unsere rumänischen Kollegen. Wir waren gemeinsam in einem Boot auf dem Weg nach dem gelobten EU-Land. Und das, was ich heute dem Herrn Botschafter gesagt habe, will ich auch Ihnen sagen. Wir waren fleißig und freundlich, nicht wahr? Bulgarien und Rumänien. Ich hoffe, dass auch diese Stimmung, unsere Stimmung, fleißig und freundlich in all diesen Jahren, in den Jahren der Verhandlungsgesprächen, in den 15 Jahren Mitgliedschaft, das ist wichtig, fleißig und freundlich als Partners und gemeinsam in unserem EU. Vielen Dank.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we are coming to an end of this wonderful celebration, which was rich of content. I wanted to thank all the panelists, the moderator, for, I think, extremely interesting discussion. I wanted notably to thank the young students, participants, the younger generation. This is the European Year of the Youth. So every word that somebody from the younger generation tells us weighs double. And therefore, all your questions were particularly important. So thank you for your participation. And please use the time afterwards to discuss. I take away three things from today's discussion, and perhaps you find them half a good summary of what we all discussed together. Number one, it is wonderful that Bulgaria and Romania are part of the European Union. I have no regrets about that, even though it is never easy. As you said, freundlich and fleißig is not always enough. We have always to work hard. You have to work hard. All of us work hard. It shows, however, how deep the process of integration is. And that brings me to my second point. Joining the European Union is not joining a golf club. It's more than joining an economic union. It's joining a community of values, a political union. Therefore, it is a hard and difficult process to get in, because once you're in, you're not only part of the family, you're an irreversible part of the family. Huh? That's how I feel together with you. There's one who didn't understand the irreversible part, but the tree is still in the Sigmund Freud part. Huh? But we know it is a difficult process, a challenging process, but it brings us very deeply together, economically, legally, politically. Therefore, it's not something that can be done lightly. And therefore, one has to work hard. It took you almost 12 years, double as long as Austria. And if we discuss today, some things are still not complete. We had a 7-year transition period for the free movement of workers, and you are still not yet in Schengen, still not in the Eurozone. So it's a long process, and I think we all should know it's not just a symbolism to join the European Union. It goes very deep. It's an offer to the whole European family, but let's not underestimate what it means. And it brings me to my third point and last point, because I go back to Sigmund Freud, as we always have to do in these days. As we started this morning in the Sigmund Freud Park. We discuss here about 15 years of membership, and we use this to reflect about ourselves, very critically. This is what the European Union does. We ask ourselves, rethinking European integration because of the war in Russia. We have 10 countries who want to join the European Union, and we think, how should we change? Is this not wonderful? And is this not the biggest difference to Putin? Because do you think at the moment in Moscow there's taking place a conference that's called Rethinking Russia's Policy vis-à-vis Ukraine? With 15 different panelists saying different things? No, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes we perceive that, and others perceive that we are weak, slow, dispute all the time. No, ladies and gentlemen, that's not our weakness. That is our European strength. Democracy, pluralism, freedom, debate. Sometimes it takes a few days longer, but at the end we come a solution behind which we are all, and that makes us stronger. Therefore, let's never believe those who think this is a weakness until the day the same conference here takes place as well in Moscow. Ladies and gentlemen, with this all, thank you very much. Thanks to all your participation, and you're all invited outside still to stay for a couple of minutes to discuss. And don't forget, we will celebrate also very soon again. We always celebrate in Europe, huh? 19 years, 20 years, 25 years. We find something. Huh? So welcome to see you very soon again, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.